defense goes, Devo goes.
Davis explosive, the lefty scores. Davis once again. He scored the last 10 for Arkansas. Comes Davis, got another one.
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome back into the Razorback basketball live stream. We're doing a little call with a hog, as we like to call it, here on the stream. Appreciate everybody who is watching in and going to be commenting in and telling us how awesome we are each and every second of this podcast and live stream. And as always, we have the same little foursome, a little golf scramble action going on, as I am John Nabors of the Locked On Razorbacks Podcast, as well as the Out of Bounds show on 103.7 The Buzz. We have Curtis Wilkerson of hogsports.com, as well as Andrew Ellis of hogsports.com, and Scottie Bordelon of wholehogsports.com. And fellas, appreciate you taking time out of your otherwise very demanding schedule on a Sunday night, and it's good to talk with you once again.
Yeah, man, I'm excited about it. It's like it's basketball eve, you know. It's good times. I think the football team restored the vibes a little bit yesterday, so adds a little bit of energy before tomorrow. And hey, my takeaway from that highlight video at the beginning is Arkansas's got a really, really deep backcourt.
Yeah, I would much rather be here than bet on the Sunday night NFL game and lose that. So
oh man,
brutal.
Well, I did bet on the NFL Sunday night game, so I'll be pulling double duty here. Gotta keep in line with all my stocks over here.
Hey, listen, at least the Razorbacks won a football game, so I mean, there's that. To go off of, but hey, that's okay. It's like somebody already said in our comments, and I kind of agree with them. It's kind of crazy that the basketball season starts tomorrow night at this time and against Alcorn State. So it's here. Like, we are officially here. We're officially getting ready to roll, and I know we'll get to all of your comments and questions for us throughout the entire live stream here. But first, guys, before we did the little recap of last season here on the live stream, and the last one we did, and this time I wanted to do a little bit of a recapping of the Arkansas-Purdue game in general, because as we all predicted, of course, Arkansas won the game, and we nailed it. We talked about how that was going to be an easy dub, but you got to admit, like, we have a lot to break down into that game. But man, after that game, and now you actually get to see it in person and go to overtime, and Arkansas gets the victory, regardless of how it happened or what happened or anything. I mean, you got to admit, a game like that and a win like that, people are already excited about the basketball season, but now it's just been elevated to a whole new level because you went and took on this really good, experienced team, and you were able to beat them when you've just been playing together for a very short period of time.
Yeah, man, it's easy to say don't overreact to exhibition results until you beat the number 3 team in the country in a game like that. It's kind of tough not to get excited. And when I've been asked about it, on the radio or on our message boards or whatever, I'm telling people to go ahead and get excited, because I do think that result matters. Obviously doesn't count in the win-loss, but just given who they were playing, a team that brought so many returning pieces back. I mean, those are the Big Ten regular season and conference champions. It was a 1 seed national player of the year who's so unique. And to me, for Arkansas to be able to take a new team that hasn't been together that long and implement a game plan and go out there and execute it the way they did on both ends of the floor in a high pressure situation, go to overtime and out execute a team like that and win. I think it speaks volumes about where they're at. And if there's anything I take away from it, it's that I think Arkansas might be a little bit ahead of schedule right now going into the season.
Yeah, I think we learned a couple of things from the exhibition. It's that, Trevin Brazile looks like Eric said the whole time while he was recovering from that knee injury that he was ahead of schedule, in terms of his rehab and stuff. He looks ahead of schedule in terms of looking like himself again. And it started right off the bat when he beat Edey on the tip and then Arkansas's first possession, he goes up like 14 feet for a lob. Like if he would have put that down or found a way to put that in the rim, like even laying it in, like the place would have just detonated. But yeah, we saw him, stretch his legs in the open floor and put down a big dunk. I wish he would have thrown down a windmill or something for us instead of like a tomahawk. But I think TB is looking looking better than I expected him to be real honest, and stretching the floor like he did at times last year when he was healthy. And then I think you may have found who your closer could be, like in the first actual competition that you had. And you got guys around him, like you got Caleb Battle on the weak side. When you got Tremont Mark in a side pick and roll, I like that. And we haven't even talked about Ellis, who got an and one that put Arkansas ahead for good in overtime. So, yeah, I'm with Curtis. Like the backcourt's really good. Chandler Lawson, I told you he wasn't just a good preseason story a couple weeks ago. And then the Purdue game happened. So I'm on that train times 2 now, I think.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like, I don't know if we necessarily learned a whole lot. I mean, it was nice to see stuff like Chandler Lawson. I think that's the one maybe surprise from this game is him playing 30 whatever minutes he played. But I feel like it's more like we're vindicated for what we've kind of been saying about this team for a while now, all offseason, and the stuff the narratives we've been spinning, which is like, this is a more veteran team. They should be a little bit more ahead of schedule than maybe what we've seen in the last couple preseasons, definitely this time last year when they were getting beat by 30 against Texas. And so I guess like it was just really good to see Arkansas belong the way they did. And, you see them go up against Purdue. That's the type of team you see in the second weekend. That's the type of team you're going to be competing with that, I don't know where Purdue is going to end up falling, if they're a top 5, top 10, top 15 team. But, that just to see Arkansas, that's a pretty nice barometer right there. And whether Arkansas had even won this game or not, you just saw that they had answers to a lot of problems that Purdue presented. And Purdue didn't have as many answers for stuff that they were presenting. I feel like Arkansas, it's not even like they played out of their minds. It's not like this was a flawless performance where they showed what kind of level they can get to. This team's going to get a lot better. I mean, for all the reasons like you guys have mentioned, I kind of forgot that Trevor Brazile got stuffed by the rim. I kind of forgot about it until Scottie tried to. Yeah, I thought that was awesome. But Trevin is one that I think of, like, we get to see just little flashes. That wasn't the full Trevor Brazile experience, but the way that Arkansas's top players showed up and the way that they rose to the occasion and kind of just looked the part in a stage like that, and the way that they rose to the environment that Arkansas put together, because we're going to see stuff just like that throughout conference play and definitely in that Duke game. And so it's good to see these guys get some of that experience on the big stage that, a lot of teams aren't getting this time of year.
No, my favorite thing.
The record show, by the way, that we were sitting here last week talking about Tremont Mark being a lead ball handler, and he looked pretty good down the stretch and in overtime doing it. So that's a point for us, I think.
Well, and it was funny too, because first off, about the Trevor Brazile stuff by the rim, I wish I knew what it was like to get stuffed by the rim. Like, I would love to be in that position. Like, it's like I'll get stuffed by air. Like, I can't even get up there to the net. But still, it just kind of shows you that the athleticism and what this team was. And so I know we've already talked about a few of the specific players and everything, but I'm curious because I want to get everyone's take on this. Biggest surprise to you after the Purdue game? It could be an individual, it can be a play, it can be a thing, good or bad. But just as far as like, and Curtis, will start with you. Like, what was the biggest surprise that you saw in that Purdue game when you looked at it, you're like, wow, okay, I did not expect that to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but just the way, that they were able to put together that game plan for Zach Edey and execute it the way they did, that really impressed me. He never really seemed comfortable. He never really seemed in a rhythm, and maybe because because they were preparing to develop and not to win the game or whatever the hell they're talking about over there. But no, I mean, I just think the job that Chandler Lawson did on him, Mekhi Mitchell was involved in that too, but it was a team effort, man. And that's tough to do, in October, when you're bringing help from different angles. Sometimes they were slipping a guy from the baseline and trying to poke it out on those post entries. Sometimes they're digging down and doubling right away. Sometimes they're waiting for Edey to put it on the floor, and then they're trying to dig it out of there. And that there's got to be a lot of communication involved with that. You're scrambling, trying to recover. It's really got to be, everybody on a string and a full defensive effort to execute that without having a bunch of breakdowns. And for them to do it in the preseason with a new group like that was really, really impressive to me. I think that's what stood out.
Yeah, I'll go with one of the young dudes. I think Layden Blocker played his minutes like, that was awesome. What he did, like his first actual minutes against some actual competition, And I don't know that he gets in the game necessarily if Devo doesn't get in, early foul trouble or whatever, but he played the hell out of his minutes, man. And you do that against a backcourt that, it's not a bunch of upperclassmen with, Fletcher Lawyer and Braden Smith, but those two guys, I think you could say, are as upperclassmen as sophomores get, in terms of big game minutes and things like that. And he looked like he belonged out there. And I liked the action with him and TB in a pick and roll. He, utilized TB on a lob situation. It's just, I saw a lot of good stuff, and he wanted to sit down and defend somebody too. And he wasn't worried about like potentially being on an island and these older guys, maybe exposing him a little bit. He was meeting guys at half court, clapping his hands, ready to sit down and guard somebody. I don't know if it'll, lead to a bunch of minutes in non-conference play or whatever, but I think you kind of like the fearlessness of that young guy early. And it's probably, because he's been tested against a bunch of old dudes, behind closed doors before that.
I agree with both of y'all's points, but I'm glad y'all left the correct answer of Chandler Lawson to me. I mean, it's obviously Chandler Lawson. What are you talking about? I mean, we can talk about the defense and Bladen Blocker played 9 minutes. Chandler Lawson
might have been exactly what I talked about, actually.
So.
No, yeah, but I'm saying
that's what I wrote about that night.
But I'm saying Chandler Lawson was obviously the biggest surprise, I thought. I mean, I thought that, the defense definitely was more ahead of schedule than I thought. And I think, when you talk about the game plans that this team has to go through and facing a star player, how good Muss is and stuff like that, getting this team experience doing stuff like that, I thought was awesome. And to Curtis's point, they definitely were a lot tighter in those regards. Like it felt like they were very ahead of schedule on the defensive end. But I didn't think Chandler Lawson would start necessarily. I didn't know what Makai's situation would be like. I definitely didn't think he'd be closing games at the 5. And, we talked last week about who we kind of see at the end of the year closing games. I figured they'd have an extra big guy in there. I just expected it to be Makai. I just did not expect that Chandler Lawson was going to earn the trust the way he did. And knocked down a 3. I mean, it's not like he lit up the stat. I think he had like 2 rebounds, but just the way that he fit in and, showed that he's obviously going to do good things against real competition. I mean, if this were a matchup, if you can play in this game, in this type of matchup, then you can play against anybody just about. So it's, I'm pretty impressed with the way that Chandler Lawson showed, and just the fact that he's as involved as he is, I think is probably the biggest preseason development to this point, at least in my eyes.
I mean, do we think that after, a performance like that, does he start on opening night? I mean, it's crazy because I was back and forth on, is he in the rotation? Is he not? Yeah. Well, he definitely is. But I mean, how can you start, and even if it's an exhibition, and have that performance against a guy like Zach Edey, and then not get it against Alcorn State? I mean, he makes the big bucks, so he's going to do what he's got to do. But I'd have a hard time taking the guy out of the lineup. It's crazy.
Yeah, if I could add one more thing on Chandler, I go back and I actually had Ethan help me out with the shots defended for each Arkansas player against the UT Tyler game because it wasn't televised, so we had to do it live. But I went back and rewatched the Purdue game, and in the 2 exhibitions, Chandler Lawson gave up 4 buckets on 21 shots defended. Wow. That's going to play, dude, a lot. It's going to play a lot. I mean, I think it was 4 of 17 that opponents were against him on 2-point shots, so under 25%, even better.
Well, I think it really helps his case that him and Trevin seem to have a nice, like they're able to play together, and it's not really a thing at all. Because that's obviously going to be a huge factor for whatever big man's going to try to. I mean, Graham, Makai, or even Bay Fall to an extent. It's like whoever's going to play at the 5 is going to have to learn how to play with Trevin, because Trevin's going to play 32 minutes a night. So it's like whoever it is that has the best chemistry with him, and at least in that Purdue game, on both ends of the floor, it looked like it was Chandler that's kind of leading that race.
Well, since you guys all took the good answers, I'll go with my big surprise at least. And I don't know if it's a surprise. And it's going to sound really egotistical, but not that I'd ever be that way, but it's like, I think it's a surprise that a lot of what we talked about and what we thought we would see and thought what we wanted to see, we got the chance to see, like Tremont Mark, for instance. Now I heard that he's this clutch dude. I heard he's this tough guy. I've seen him at Houston. It's like, yes, it's great. But until you get him there and get him on campus and get to see him in Arkansas, like how will it work? And then seeing it in person and in action and that moment, and then Purdue, I'm like, all right, like it's not something I'm sure there's going to be times where we're going to have to continue like with people during this year. They're going to be like, no, they are better at 3-point shooting. Okay. I promise you, it's going to be stuff like that. But to see Tremont Mark be that way, to see Ellis kind of have that mentality offensively to really do some different things, and even a guy like you mentioned, Chandler Lawson, which I know we've already talked about, but man, I'm just hoping. I'm not saying they're the same exact player, but man, I'm just hoping he's going to be like that Jalen Tate dude, where he's just a late addition, but the like perfect little piece that he's not going to set the world on fire every game, but man, it's like you're going to look back and be like, okay, yeah, you had Ellis, you had Tremont Mark, you had Caliph Battle, you had all these guys, but man, guy that really made the difference, it seemed like, was Chandler Lawson, going up against these teams and everybody. So, yeah, I like that the fact that it was a good game, an entertaining game, but not everybody, I guess, got the same vibe that we got out of that game, because this guy, this dude, what is his name again? Can we talk about this guy? What was his name? Just so we get it right. Some Purdue dude.
I think you're talking about Brian Newbert. Yeah, I had him on my
Newbert. What does he do exactly? Just because I'm going to give him credit, make sure that
he covers Purdue for On 3.
Okay, covers Purdue for On 3. So, excuse the bad quality of this video, folks, but I'm sure you've already seen it already. But hopefully, we can get the audio for it. But this was one of the comments that he made after the game, and this is something that has to stop. This is something that just has to stop.
Than it was about specifically preparing for Grace College. Much the same as it was for Arkansas. And if you're an Arkansas fan who's been blowing me up here the last couple days, leave me alone, okay? Your coach said on the record that you were watching video of Shaquille O'Neal prepare for Purdue, okay? You go ask your coaches if they watch the games from Europe from Purdue. Purdue did not prepare for Arkansas. So the people who are in my mentions yelling at me about damage control. First of all, there was no damage because the game didn't matter. The game didn't count. Second of all, Arkansas prepared to win. Purdue prepared to develop. That was the reality of it. So leave me alone. You know where those refs were from. You know where the one guy lives, right down there in Arkansas. And it's not whining. It's just the reality of what happened. So shadow boxing with Arkansas fans right now, assuming they're watching me talking about Purdue and Grace College. Never mind.
There was a lump in his throat at the end of that.
What the crap was that? Like, I know I'm not trying to flame anybody like for, saying things or having an opinion on things, because we all got opinions. But that stuff was just like, I don't understand where this comes from, where it's just like, why can't you just say, hey, man, it was a good game. Arkansas did a great job. Home court advantage was big. It's a good team, good test. But it's like, no. Arkansas prepared to win the game. Purdue prepared to develop. Yeah, okay, that's probably why you guys have not been relevant in the NCAA tournament, is because apparently you're not preparing to win. You're just preparing to develop or preparing to
not preparing your guys is a great way to develop them. It's a great developmental step that you can take for sure.
Yeah. Well, I like that it's an either or, where it's like Arkansas didn't develop during this process, like going through a game plan and like preparing for an All-American center and like in being in front of an environment, like none of that developed. There's no development there. That was just winning.
They're going to carry that with them all the way through March. I mean, that was the entire point of setting a game like this up. I mean, heaven forbid, fans attend that game and get excited about it. It's just, it's weird. I don't like, he's more rattled about that than like Purdue is in pressure situations. Like, I don't know. I don't understand the energy there. That's just, first of all, you can't prepare for Arkansas unless you're just going through their personnel because it's a new team. You brought everybody back, man. Like, of course Arkansas prepared. Of course they did again. Like, that's part of getting ready for the season. Like Scottie said, like, that is development. I don't know, man. I don't get it. Weird energy. And people in your mentions and like, welcome to the internet. I mean, that's I don't know. I assume it's that way everywhere, but like, we cover the Razorback teams and like, I've got our own fans in my mentions all the time, but that's just part of the deal. So I don't know, man. Weird.
It's the ultimate straw man argument too. Cause it's like, if you watch the show that we did 2 weeks ago, or not even 2 weeks ago, where we were kind of like, it'll be cool to see Arkansas in this environment or whatever. Like, it's not like we had this energy. And I say we as in like the media, people talking about this stuff. It's like, he's referencing people on the internet who are not real human beings. Like, these are straight up, like, Twitter's not a real place. And this dude's over here like crying in a camera talking about that. It's like, dude, yeah, people are going to tweet at you whether it's exhibition, a hidden scrimmage, or just a 15-minute inter squad, like whatever. Like, people are going to, react to things on the internet. Like, it's just kind of how it is. And like, I think if you take Purdue out and you sub in, I don't even know who's ranked number 4. Number 4, it would have been the exact same situation. Hey, Arkansas's got this thing, this big opportunity against this opponent preseason, charity exhibition. There would have been a ton of fans there. The Duke game is going to be the same situation. Like, that's kind of how the world works. Like, you have big opponents come to your arena and you sell it out, and I don't know. It seemed like the exhibition, everyone got what they wanted out of it. I don't know why anyone would be upset following it. It just doesn't make any sense.
I'm glad Honcho said that, like, everyone is Arkansas's Super Bowl.
Kill me.
Apparently.
Kill me.
They've been winning a lot of Super Bowls lately, man.
Oh my gosh, this one hasn't started with their unbeaten in Super Bowls. Like, y'all know? I'm sure you've seen it. There's like these cringe TikTok and Instagram reel accounts where, there's the lady who is dressed in the button down and the hat sideways. She got like the big teeth, and she's like lip syncing Fast Car by Tracy Chapman, but her lip sync is really bad, and it's like one of the cringiest things you've ever seen. Every time I see that like X team was Y team Super Bowl on Twitter, I get the same exact, like, almost like a visceral reaction. Like, God forbid somebody in a fan base gets up for a game that might actually be pretty good. It's just, it might be my least favorite thing about the internet or about sports Twitter. And there's a lot that you can dislike. It's just, God forbid somebody, especially Arkansas fans.
I know
your football season was below the toilet, going into that weekend. It was like I mentioned, I think on my podcast, I was like, I think it was the best weekend of the football season, that basketball win. And people had a reason to get excited. Good team coming, like, good team. Like, I'm not saying Purdue wasn't good. Yeah. Like, why can't a school sell out an exhibition? Why can't they do that without it being a Super Bowl? It's just, Arkansas is going to do this a bunch of times this year. I would imagine it is, as long as they don't completely fall apart. It just makes me sick, man.
Well, I don't know where all this came from. And if we could just ban this stupid terminology, because I'm like, what other sport does this? Like, I just don't understand any other sport that does this. And it's college basketball. And then you throw into the mix of, like, you mentioned, Scottie, about, just heaven forbid anybody just enjoy the game. Because I would like to think, and listen, I'm the most absurd, obnoxious, biased person that there is. But it's like, I would like to think that if Arkansas lost to Purdue on Saturday, I wouldn't have been like, Arkansas, they were just preparing to develop their guys. Like, Muss wasn't actually preparing to win. I'm like, okay, then, like, if somebody actually came out and said, like, if Matt Painter said that word, which he didn't, so this is coming from him. If Matt Painter would have come out after the game and said those words of what he said, of like, we weren't preparing to win, we were preparing to develop, I'm like, then that guy's a loser. Then you're a loser. Like, you're a loser coach, and that's a loser mentality. And I would never want my coach of any sport to have that, like, mentality where it's just like, okay, yeah, well, they wanted to win, but we're just trying to develop. Develop what, man? You got all starters back from last year. Like, what do you mean develop? I hate how this has become. And as far as the internet thing goes too, like, how many times I've had, like, random, like, Alabama fans tweeting me, it's like, cope harder. Like, you just got to deal with it. It's like, okay, I don't know what you're talking about, but sure.
I mean, that video right there is the definition of, like, copium, like prime copium. I stand in front of my cell phone after every game and talk to it, but I really try not to do that. In fact, I did after that Purdue game, and I had notes made about what I wanted to say before the final outcome was decided, because kind of like Andrew and everybody else has said, regardless of the outcome, like, that was awesome. The environment was awesome. It was good for both teams. That's the message. Like, both teams got better from that. Whether they were preparing to win or not, I guess. But, like, I think Purdue learned some lessons that they need to learn about themselves from that game. Arkansas did too. Didn't count on the win-loss record, but here we go. Now we've got some things to put on tape and figure out for the season. I don't know. I just feel like it's a little overcomplicated right now. And yeah, the Super Bowl thing is weird. By the way, Purdue sold out their home exhibition a couple days later with an NAIA school. So, like, is Grace College their Super Bowl? I don't know, but I mean,
Super
come on.
Bowls. Super Bowls, undefeated in Super Bowls. It's getting out of control, and it's getting out of hand. Before we move on to the topic, though, since we have a lot of people in the comments section, again, set your comments, folks. We'll try to get to all of them, at least the good ones. And some of you put stupid ones. We're not going to read them. Let's see. This one comes from Onslaught Music. Says, I watched the Purdue game over and over again. I still feel like this is the season when we win a natty. I know it's early, but you can see championship breathing in this team. They are so calm. Yeah. I mean, championship or bust.
I think that's where we're at for sure. I think Onslaught, I think you should be mentally approaching this season as anything under that, not good.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it won't go wrong at all. And you won't be disappointed at any point in this year. I'm sure it's going to happen. Also, Preston says Biddy definitely needs to update Andrew's photo on Hog Sports Live. Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Because apparently no pictures exist of Andrew ever.
Not any updated ones. I'm clean shaven. Those are my corporate photos.
Good Lord. Well, Joshua says also Scottie and Andrew need to upgrade their background games. So.
I'm in an insane asylum. They don't let us decorate the walls. It's just not part of the deal here.
I'm doing pretty good just to find a quiet spot at my house.
No windows either.
I'm not moving from here.
Yeah. Well, it's like I got the Arkansas State flag behind me, and it's like I think I have like it's held up with putty and paper clips. So yeah, I'm really going all out in the decor.
This is not an actual wood wall behind me, by the way. It's just a backdrop. Yeah. Shout out Trey Biddy for getting that for me.
Yeah. Trey Biddy, who looks like he's doing it in the basement of like the local speakeasy. Let's see. Ice Cold Mint Julep says must teams always get better over a season. So to be playing well this out of the gate, what does that say for the rest of the season?
Well, Andrew Ellis has a theory that it means they're going to lose in the first round of the NCAA tournament.
That's not true, but I will say that progression is not linear. So I don't know if we necessarily need to do that where it's like, oh, they're just going to keep getting exponentially better, but they definitely are. I think that's why I've been saying this might be the best regular season team Muzz has had, because I think they're a lot closer to whatever that finished product is. And there's still plenty of, room for them to grow. But I do think that it just tells you, like, I was just thinking during the game, I kept leaning over to Grant and I was like, how bad would this team have gotten beat by last year's team gotten beat by this Purdue team? If you took last year's team with Anthony Black, Nick Smith, and Trevin, who was silent in that game last year against Texas, like if you took them and played at Purdue, I think they lose by 26. I think it would look very similar to that Texas game. And so I think it does say a lot about kind of where this team's at. But we'll see if it's that simple, is that they're just going to keep getting better and better and be better than ever. But we'll see.
I don't know if this makes sense or not, but I do agree that Arkansas's played well out of the gate, but it might just be easy to say that because they've had a week between, so they played October 4th, the red-white game, whatever. October 20, you don't play again for 16 days and it's against actual competition, but then you don't play again for another 8 days. We don't know how Arkansas would have played, like, say they played October 28th and then they played like the following Wednesday. Did they play well again? We don't really know. I think they're obviously deep enough where Eric can find 5 guys that can, 5 or 6, 7 guys that can go get it done. But I think it's encouraging that you play that well against Purdue. I think it was encouraging that they gave, the people that showed up a reason to get into the game and make the crowd.
Exactly.
It's a great crowd, man. It really was.
There's sometimes when Arkansas in the past has had these really big crowds and then they just kind of don't really show up or can't make shots or whatever, and they don't give the 19,000 plus in there a reason to, kind of get rowdy, but they did that time.
Well, and I'll say this too, and we can move on to the next topic, but about the crowds, and I have said this, and I'm sure you guys would agree. I've gone to Razorback games my whole life. I've gone to Razorback football games, basketball games, baseball games my whole life. And if you said, okay, I'm going to give you packed to the rafter house, wildest atmosphere at Razorback football stadium, at Bud Walton Arena, and at Baum-Walker Stadium, as amazing as those are, give me Bud Walton Arena every single time, because it is like, I want to say it was Kyle Tucker, who writes for The Athletic now, I believe, but he was covered Kentucky basketball for a long time. And I remember when Calipari got ejected in that game at home, he had said something to the extent of, he's like, Bud Walton Arena is the only place I've ever been where physical assault is committed on my eardrums. Because he's like, it's not just loud, it's anger, it's hatred, it's vitriol, it's just like the fact that you can, like, if you put a good product on the field, Razorback fans are always going to show up. But when you have that happening in basketball, it shows you how much Razorback fans hate or love basketball and love games of Bud Walton and just love quality products. Like, it's a basketball state. I still believe it. Like, that shows you right there, just of the many things and many reasons why. All right, so moving on to the next one. I know we'll do some preview in the actual season, but this was an interesting deal that I wanted to bring up personally, because I thought with Eric Musselman and the expectations, as we all know, looking at the comments, apparently have it this year. Muss has yet to win a regular season SEC title or an SEC tournament title or have a player of the year, which, we can talk about all three in separate occasions. But the question becomes is like everyone will take the NCAA tournament success over all of that. We all know that that's what matters in the end. But as far as like winning the SEC regular season, starting with that, will Muss do that? Like, will it happen? Does it have to happen? Does it need to happen? Because he's been doing fine without it. But like, when does that happen, and how important it is at some point to win the regular season if you're Eric Musselman in the SEC?
I mean, this probably strikes me as the team that's, I don't know, maybe has the best chance to do it because of their depth, and because they're older. But I don't know, man. It seems like every year, whether it's been, like an Isaiah Joe or Justin Smith injury, or just that weird 2-week, 3-week stretch where they just can't seem to figure anything out. It's like they bury themselves in the standings and spend, the entire month of February or whatever kind of climbing out of it. And they've had their opportunities there, but I don't know, man. Like, I just think with Eric Musselman, just the way he operates with his program, like his full mindset is, how do I coach this team to make sure they're peaking in March? And if that means taking some L's along the way, then so be it. But I mean, hey, I'm sure if they were winning every game along the way, he'd be okay with that too. But I don't want to say he doesn't care, because he does. But I just think he has his eyes on something greater. And so I think he's kind of a master of, maybe staying true to the process. And if that leads to a regular season title, great. But if that means they've got to do, have some hiccups along the way, have some of these stretches where we think that they're going to completely fall apart because they start SEC play 1-3 before they figure it out, then whatever. But everything he does, even this exhibition against Purdue, like it's with eyes on everything we do every day, every game, get better and get prepared for March. Like, what lessons can be learned and how can we get a little bit better every day in advance of that? So I don't know. I don't know if they're ever going to get it done, but I think they've got a team that's certainly capable of doing it. And they've got a roster that's capable of doing it every year.
I was looking at the preseason projected order of finish, and Arkansas was picked to finish third. Obviously, we talked about this last time on Tennessee and Texas A&M, and Arkansas has A&M at home. They've got Tennessee at home, and I believe they have to go to Texas A&M. So you got 2 of those 3 games against those other 2 teams that are picked ahead of you. You got them at home. You got Kentucky at home too. I know you still have to go to Kentucky too, and you got to go to Alabama too. I don't think you get Alabama at home this year, which is tough. Like, that would be that would be absolute scenes if Alabama came here. But Kentucky can be that too. I do think, like, Eric would. I think he places a lot more value in an SEC regular season championship than a conference championship, because you're just having to go through the grind of the whole season, as opposed to, just you never, unless you're playing in like an MTE like Arkansas is going to do at Battle for Atlantis, you never have to play games in back-to-back days potentially. You never have to do that. The NCAA tournament, you win a game, you get a day off, and then you play again. Never throughout the course of a season, minus those MTEs, do you play consecutive days. And so I think you put a lot more weight in a regular season title. I think the team's talented enough to do it. I think they're going to have to probably get really, really tough as hell on the road and steal a game from somebody that, might be better than them going into it. That's just kind of how you win regular season titles, is you go and just you beat people up on the road, and then you protect your home floor as best as you can.
Yeah, I definitely don't think they need to. I know Arkansas finished 10th in the SEC last year because I've written it a few times. I don't know where they finished 2 years ago. I don't know where they finished 3 years ago. I don't know where they finished 4 years. It's like I feel like that kind of stuff, it's nice, and I think it basically comes down to how nice do you want your graphic to look like whenever they're showing the head coach profile pregame. That's pretty much where that stuff lives and dies. Like, nobody knows who won the 2019 SEC tournament in basketball. They don't know who. I feel like I've done this soapbox on how conference tournaments suck a lot, but definitely not the tournament. But winning the SEC regular season, that's another one that I think Muss would probably like to do, but I don't think it's keeping him up at night. And I think that no doubt he would trade he wouldn't trade any of the postseason success for that. But I will say, I think it sets up pretty nicely, as crazy as it sounds like. I think this year might do it. The thing it would take is, I think it's going to come down to those final 2 road games against Bama and Kentucky. I think you can kind of just go ahead and circle those. I think those are the 2 of the last 3 is what we determined. And they're going into that. They have some of their tougher road games late. And so I feel like they're able to build some momentum and go into it with a lead or two. I think it's going to end up coming down to those games. And once you get there, anything can happen. So I think this is as good of an opportunity as any for Arkansas. But I mean, again, I don't think it matters all that much. It'd be nice though.
Yeah, John made a pretty good point. John Satterfield, it's like you just can't have somebody get injured in the front court badly or whatever. Like, you've obviously got to be really talented to win a regular season title, but you got to have some luck in there too, keeping everybody healthy. Like, it's pretty tough on these college kids, you know, even though they're not playing like a rigorous NBA schedule, like 3 or 4 games in a week. You get 2 most of the time, 3, you know, feast week and stuff like that. But if you can stay healthy, I think you give yourself a chance if you're able to keep your guys, you know, available.
Well, the last thing I'll say on that is, you know, the SEC this year, I feel like it's pretty deep. Like, there's some good teams at the top, but it's pretty, you know, the top 10 teams, there's not a ton of separation, and there's some duds there at the bottom that everyone will be able to beat up on. But I think this is going to be a year where a lot of teams can get caught in random Tuesday nights at Mississippi State, and like Ole Miss is not going to be an easy out these next few years. You know, it's like I think there's a lot of room for getting caught in those type of games. And so who wins the SEC this year might just come down to who does less stupid stuff like that, honestly.
Yeah. To go back to Scotty's point real quick about just, you know, injuries. I mean, obviously that impacts any team. You got to stay healthy if you're going to win a championship or whatever. But I mean, if I had to probably pick my top concern with Arkansas, it is that, you know, that front court depth, because you look at it, man. And I mean, they've got some really talented pieces, but, you know, Brazil is coming off of an ACL tear. Mekhi Mitchell is coming off a broken foot in the summer. Jalen Graham's back is in worse shape than mine. And then you have, you know, Chandler Lawson, who's playing his ass off right now, but he's undersized for the position. And, you know, Bay Fall's a freshman that's got a lot of work to do to develop. So, yeah, man, like if those guys are healthy and you got a good rotation going on there, because I do think that position is going to be kind of a platoon type situation, maybe for Arkansas, matchup based, whatever. I think you got enough pieces to be really good at that spot. But I mean, like, you know, one guy goes down or, you know, needs to go into load management or whatever, then you know, it's kind of looking a little bit iffy there, especially if we're talking about SEC regular season titles, when you're playing bigger, stronger, more physical teams in the paint. Like, you can get away with it against Alcorn State, maybe not Mississippi State. So that's definitely something I've got my eye on moving forward, because injuries have already been a problem for these forwards.
Yeah.
Well, and another thing too is, like, when we're talking about these 3 in particular, with an SEC winning the SEC regular season or winning the SEC tournament or having a player of the year in the SEC, obviously it's about only March Madness and what they do in the NCAA tournament. However, if I'm doing like a power rankings of what I think is most likely to happen for Arkansas, I feel like that it would be most likely Arkansas wins the SEC regular season, then have a player of the year, and then the SEC tournament. And it's only because it's like those SEC tournaments, I'm with Andrew, we've talked about it, so we don't need to like go into that again, but it's like, it doesn't have the same luster. And unless you're just desperate for some wins to get into the NCAA tournament, it really doesn't do anything for you. So, but it's wild because you have so many great players that have been on Arkansas's roster and that will continue to be on Arkansas's roster. And that's kind of the thing of like looking at it from a perspective of like, how are you going to get to that point next? I don't know. But I
pull up the comment section. We got to discuss a comment, emergency comment discussion.
Oh gosh, is it talking about the John Satterfield guy?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, let's do this. Be interesting to see how 2 players play tomorrow. 2 starters out on Dixon last night did not see a drink in their hands.
Listen, I'm just going to say this: if this is the criteria for whether or not an Arkansas team is going to play well, it's not no team in the history of Arkansas sports programs is going to perform well if the criteria is they can't have drinks at JJ's the night before game.
Dude, I don't know. I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay,
It's on a Saturday night.
That's just the rules. I'm sorry. Like, if that's
recover.
Yeah. Like, hey man, listen, it's what do you expect out of them, man? And also get John on there for investigative reporting. Like, he's the one that's got the sauces. Get them out there and start breaking some news there. That's the case.
$2 margs get out of your system pretty quick.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's going to, like, you know.
And I can't blame anybody for going to JJ's and getting 250 cans of Busch Light. Like,
heck yeah.
invite me next time if you're doing that.
Yeah. And also, hey, by the way, Arkansas football won a game. So, like, let people celebrate.
Let them celebrate. Also, if you see them, buy them a drink. How about that? What do you think about that?
I hope Pooh Paul was down there for his birthday. Yesterday was Saturday was his birthday. You get a dub. Yeah. Have a drink.
Yeah, I hope the whole team was out there, and I hope that they were playing pinata with Dan Enos. Like, I don't know, but that would have been great. We'll get to those comments here in a bit. So so going back to on topic, but SEC regular season tourney player of the year. We'll do this of those three for this season because that's what we're kind of doing is previewing. Of those three, which do y'all think you would put money on, or at least you would bet on? That it would be most likely that Arkansas gets this year of those three?
I would probably go tournament. I would probably go tournament.
Okay.
Because it's a week. And here's my thing about that. It's actually kind of interesting to me that it hasn't happened yet because Eric Musselman is so good in the short prep and the quick turnaround from his NBA days. Now, that hasn't translated to the conference tournament yet. Like on one hand, I could sit here and say that, like we talked about, like they don't give a damn about the conference tournament or whatever, but I've seen Eric Musselman more pissed off after losing in the SEC tournament than I've seen him at the NCAA tournament. Like he cares. Okay. Like they lose in the SEC tournament. They fly back to Fayetteville and like, he doesn't even want to be at Selection Sunday sometime because he's so ticked off about losing to Texas A&M in the semifinals in Nashville or whatever. So, if they get that double bye too, what does that mean? You have to win 3 games in 3 days. Is that how that works?
I think so.
Yeah. So it's, it kind of takes a couple games off of the docket there. So I could see that maybe as opposed to the regular season, because it's that whole body of work, like over the course of a 2.5 month, regular season, you're probably going to hit a downswing or you're going to be without a guy for a game or two. Like stuff happens over the course of the year. And then player of the year, I think they're too balanced. Like,
that's great. Yeah.
Like, do they have a guy that's going to give you 20 every night, or do they have like 6 or 7 guys who can give you 20 on a given night? So maybe outside of, Trevin Brazil, like if he really pops, then I don't know if they have like that type of guy. I think they're more of a sum of all their parts. This is what I think.
Yeah, I might put the tournament first too, player of the year last, but like the SEC regular season title is like it might just be the toughest of like all of those three. Just it's a whole season grind, and I mean you could have a guy, you could be playing really well, have a guy miss a week, and then drop 2 games, and you could be totally out of the race potentially. And I agree with Curtis on the player of the year stuff. Like I think we could see it could be one of these cases where in Arkansas's first, 5 or 6 games, they've got 5 or 6 different leading scorers. Like it could legitimately be one of those things. Do I think the regular or the non-conference schedule will help Eric narrow in on who his his go-to guys are? For sure. I think Trevin's going to be one of their, maybe top 2 leading scorers in conference play, because I think you're going to have to go to him, and I feel like he's going to drive so much of your success because he's going to be on the floor a lot. He's one of your better players. Player of the year is just, it's tough because I mean, there's so many damn good players in this league, man. Like Justin
Edwards, more draft picks, man. It's crazy.
Yeah. And there's this kid, the kid at Kentucky, Justin Edwards. I don't even know what he looks like, but they're like, I've listened to podcasts and they're like, yeah, potential player, like national player of the year type guy, freshman player of the year type guy. There's just, this conference has got so many good players in it. Not to say that Arkansas doesn't have top tier talent. I think they do to compete. But I'm with Curtis. I just think they're too balanced to have a guy like, maybe pop for 18 to 20 points a game.
I hate it when Curtis is right, but I think Curtis, he won me over here. Like I was ready to say the regular season thing, but then he started talking, and the quick turnaround point is a good one. They're so good at quick turnarounds, and that's why I like Arkansas in those settings, like an NCAA tournament or even like Atlantis or those preseason tournaments, because I think those dudes are just so good at coming up with game plans on the fly and like short notice. It doesn't matter. And so I think that's a good point. The one thing I'll say is regular season, I think there's only like 5 or 6 teams a given year who realistically can win the SEC regular season championship. Like Georgia just can't win it this year. I don't even know who's on Georgia's roster. I couldn't tell you one player, but there's no way they're winning the SEC regular season title. Vandy, South Carolina, you could just knock off like 6 right there, So I think that's probably why I would lean towards the regular season still. And I think weirdly enough, if you win that regular season, I think that increases your chances of getting the player of the year. And so weirdly enough, that might be the path for someone like Trevin, where maybe Trevin averages 18, 9, and 2, and he's not like first-team All-American, but he's the SEC player of the year because Arkansas goes 14-4 and they win the league by 2 games and stuff like that. But you know what? They're going to win the SEC regular season title this year. So I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, he will win one. It'll be this year, and that's the most likely because it's going to happen right now. It's happening as we speak. So I think I'm going to go with that one.
Man, if he does a clean sweep like this year and then like wins the national championship, I don't think you could have a better year of any sort. Like, I think maybe Kentucky.
I'd say if they won all the accolades of the entire every possible accolade, I'd say that probably is a pretty good year, John.
Yeah, it wouldn't be bad. But I guess Kentucky was the only one that was really close to doing all that. Like, because then Anthony Davis won Player of the Year. They won the SEC regular season. Now they lost the tournament though because they lost. I think it was like to
Vanderbilt. It was Vanderbilt is who it was.
Yeah. So it's very.
They almost did it that year. They went undefeated. They were like 36-1. They ended up because they lost in the Final Four. But that team, I feel like, probably was going to break everything.
Yeah. Well, we can also say that like it still pisses me off that Mason Jones got screwed out of SEC Player of the Year that year when he beat Emmanuel Quickly in like literally every statistical category. The only one.
Wait a minute. Didn't Moses Moody win it? Or did he? Maybe he was freshman of the year. I was like, wait, didn't he already do this?
Mason did get co-player of the year by the AP, but
also, by the way, we're forgetting about the fact that the 2020 tournament, they were going to win that one. So like they pretty much already did it once. I mean, they beat Vanderbilt in the Wednesday night sadness game. So that's a pending title.
Yeah, I know. It's just same thing with Arkansas Razorback baseball. You know, Heston Kjerstad would have won Player of the Year and probably would have won the World Series that year. But, you know, COVID has always trying to keep the Razorbacks down.
He would have added to Arkansas's Golden Spikes. Like they have a Golden Spikes dude every 3 years. It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah. At least it's consistent. So now moving on, like let's talk a little bit about the conference in general since we talked about the SEC and get into some of the power rankings of what we think for the SEC in general, because we know to go through it all. This is the predicted order of finish that the media had. Now, again, it's the media. I know everyone thinks we get it right every single time, but sometimes we do make mistakes. And this is the order of finish for the media preseason. Tennessee number 1, A&M number 2, Arkansas's at number 3, Kentucky at 4, Alabama 5, Auburn 6, Mississippi State 7, Florida at 8, Missouri at 9, 10 is Ole Miss, 11 Vanderbilt, 12 Georgia, 13 LSU, 14 South Carolina. So as far as our power rankings of what we think that this conference is going to look like, does that match up? Is that how we feel about it? Did the media get it right? Or are there a lot of things that we think are going to go a little bit differently this year?
Well, people are going to get upset about this because of the whole regular season Rick thing at Tennessee, but they're really good, man.
Yeah,
like
they are.
I watched, I don't know if you guys saw any of that exhibition they played against Michigan State, like without Ziegler or Vescovy, and they beat them. I get it. It's an exhibition, but they're really good. They're always tough. They're always physical. They defend. They've got a good home court advantage. I like that they went into the transfer portal and added a guy like Dalton Connect. Like he's really, really talented. I wish Arkansas would have got him. So I'm buying on Tennessee, and I'm buying on Arkansas being high up there too. I think where I might differ personally from maybe some other people is I'm not always as bought in on like the teams who just bring a bunch of guys back and basically they just run it back the next year. Like, so I'm not sure about Texas A&M or Mississippi State even as teams that are, I mean, they were good last year. They're bringing a lot of guys back, but there's continuity. I get it, but that doesn't really matter once you get into conference play. Like teams have come together and gelled by that point for the most part. So how much did you improve over last season if you didn't make additions? I know guys, develop and things like that, but I might have teams like that a little bit lower than some others. And I understand why they're voted high. I kind of disagree with some of the sentiment there.
Yeah, I do like Tennessee at 1, and I'm with Curtis too. Like we legitimately watched A&M get punked in the NCAA tournament live and in person
with a bush of light. It was
a tall
wonderful.
One too.
Really good. And it like seeing A&M lose honestly made it go down even easier. I think Wade Taylor's really good. I think Tyrese Radford's good. I've listened, like I mentioned, I've listened to some podcasts and some people like A&M to go to the Final Four. I just don't
get out of here.
I don't see it. I think Buzz Williams is a good coach. I think like schematically, I think he's probably one of the tougher coaches to go up against. But I don't know. Obviously you need good guard play, but I think Wade Taylor's good. But can Tyrese Radford be like be the Robin to his Batman and like help him get to a second weekend? I'm not buying that. And maybe one of those deals where I need to see it to believe it. Maybe Kentucky's a little bit underrated. I think they're just roster's just really talented, really good freshman class. If they can get their big foreign kid eligible, I think he could be a problem to deal with, because I don't know that there's many teams in the league that would have the size to match up with him. I think Cal's under a lot of pressure, though, so I'm interested to see how that maybe plays a factor in Kentucky's whole season. And now he's kind of like most pressurized season maybe that he's had at Kentucky, and he's kind of going to be depending on a bunch of guys playing college ball for the first time. That'll be interesting. I like where Arkansas is at. I mean, I don't really see them potentially falling too far, but I do think that like ceiling is, you could win the regular season if you just, if your older guys play old and tough and win you some really contested games.
Here's why I really like Arkansas to win the league. Like I said, as I declared that they would do just a few minutes ago, is because there's a lot of teams in the SEC that are kind of like consistent overachievers. Like I would consider Tennessee, even though they're a little bit more, now they have a veteran team and they've underachieved in the postseason, but just historically they overachieve in the regular season. Jans at Florida, I feel like, at Mississippi State is like a consistent overachiever. Beard at Ole Miss now, you got to kind of throw. They're kind of a wild card. I think they're picked 9th in the league or somewhere in that range. But it's like nobody really knows what they're going to look like. Like they might just be clamping dudes up and hold them to 40 points a game. So it's like that might. I feel like there's a lot of teams that are not necessarily like true contenders that are going to make a run in March, but are teams that aren't fun to play in the regular season. I feel like that's kind of how I view the SEC. And so I feel like Arkansas has a lot of answers for teams like that. Like I don't see them getting caught in that like random midweek game at Mississippi State, because I think they have a veteran team that has answers to more problems. So I think, like I mentioned earlier, I think Arkansas is better equipped to deal with some of those middle of the pack teams who are like not super talented, but just kind of scrappy and tough outs that are going to play good defense. I think Arkansas is going to win a lot of those matchups just because I think Arkansas has a good mix of those elements, and there's just a talent discrepancy between Arkansas and some of those teams, like a Mississippi State, who's not going to have Tolu Smith, right? Isn't he out for like
at least until
3 months or something like that?
Yeah. Isn't that a big man with a foot injury too? Is that that's tough.
Yeah. Well, and we were talking about big men earlier, and I think that the SEC, weirdly enough, just doesn't have dudes like Zach Edey. Like the SEC has a lot of talent, a lot of draft picks, but it's more the wings and the athletes than it is like the big 280-pound Hunter Dickinson type of guy who's going to just abuse you if you have a bad front court. And so that's why I feel like Arkansas's front court deficiency, if that's what we're going to call it, like might not bite them as much as it would in some years or in certain situations. And again, we just watched them play the best big man in the country, and it didn't matter as much as we thought. And they didn't even get a good performance out of Mackay. So it's like, I think Arkansas is going to be equipped to be the ultimate overachiever in a league full of overachievers.
I do want to add something onto what you said, because I think you're right about Ole Miss. Like they're kind of the ultimate wild card because they're going to be really well coached, and they've still got a couple dudes in limbo who are like those second-time transfers. The Musa Cisse kid, who's like the 7-foot shot blocker that was at Memphis and Oklahoma State. Like he's still kind of hanging out there. Brandon Murray, we remember him from LSU. Like he was a dog, and then where was he? Georgetown or something last year, and so he's a second-time transfer. They're trying to get his situation figured out. So, like if they get both of those guys cleared somehow to go along with, Matthew Morrell, and they've got Alan Flanagan now and, Brakefield, some of those guys, like they could be a sneaky, like get into the NCAA tournament type team. If they don't, then you don't know about their depth. And then Alabama, obviously we got to speak on Alabama, right? But to me, the thing with them is, I think Alabama's still a tournament team and all that, and I think they're good. I like the Aaron Estrada kid from Hofstra. I like Grant Nelson, obviously, from North Dakota State. But they did lose a ton, and they don't have a Brandon Miller this year. But the main thing with them is I think the fluctuation you see with Nate Oates coach teams is it like directly correlates with how they are on the defensive end of the floor. Like their best defensive teams have been their best teams by far. They're always going to chuck a bunch of threes, be able to score it, whatever. But when they defend, they can be elite. And I think that's where they kind of are vulnerable this year because they've lost some really, really good pieces on that end. So I don't remember where they were at in that projected order of finish, but I would probably still say they're like a top, like if there's a top 5 or 6 in the SEC, sure, I think Alabama belongs in that, but maybe closer to the bottom than the top, if you ask me about them.
Yeah, because I'm looking at just where everything's at, and there's so many new players, and there's some players that everybody kind of knows already about. And what was it? Arkansas was picked to finish 2nd last year, and they finished 10th. Isn't that what it was?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, and not this. Hopefully, there's not a case of that. Although if it was A&M, it would be kind of funny. But
Lamont Paris at South Carolina made this point at media days. When he was first guy up that day, and first question he was asked about was finish or being projected to finish last, and he kind of, he got kind of offended by it because they didn't even finish last in the league last year, and he thinks they got better and they still finished last, but like nobody in the predicted order of finish bowl last season finished where they were projected. So it's just kind of something that we do to talk about. Adding on to that Bama point, I'm with Curtis. I like Grant Nelson a lot. Like I had an entire analysis written on him that I was ready to hit publish on if he would have come here.
You and me both, buddy.
I think Estrada's a player too. Like Eric's seen that in person as well. When Hofstra beat Arkansas down in North Little Rock, but they don't have a Noah Clowney, and they don't have a Charles Bediako, kind of protecting the rim. I wonder what kind of defensive team. And maybe it's just because I'm not plugged in at Alabama at all. Can they score? I probably think that they can. They've got Mark Spears back. I think he's a really good kind of undersized guard. But can they defend? Like you lost some really lengthy, talented dudes on the defensive end that maybe covered up for maybe some individual deficiencies last year. That's going to be an interesting team.
Well, I'll say this about Arkansas, like specifically, since they're picked to finish 3rd. I'll put it this way: is like if they finish anything lower than 5th, I'll be like something went wrong. Somebody got hurt. Like that's kind of how I look at it. Like something went terribly, terribly wrong. But like for the other teams too, like when you brought up A&M, I'm the same thing. It's like they win games, and you can't give them credit for it. But it's just like maybe this is a bad analogy, but I just feel like it's like, man, it's like watching like a team run the triple option where they're like winning games, but it's like, I mean, are you good? Like, are you just like doing things that, it doesn't really complement the game of basketball? Like it's not aesthetically pleasing basketball. I just feel like at some point in time, it's going to hurt him. Like it's going to come back to haunt him.
Drawing free throws and getting on the offensive glass exclusively. Like it's hard to
trust
watch.
Buzz though, man. Like Buzz is going to be a dude that I'm always like weary of his teams though. That's just not the team you want to play in the regular season, especially like, I don't know
about that loss to Wofford in early December either. Like,
don't do the victory lap. If you've been arguing with an A&M fan all off season, don't do the victory lap in November or December because like March is going to roll around and they're going to kill you in the SEC tournament.
And it's a tough matchup for Arkansas every year for whatever reason. For Muss, he got pissed at me for asking about it last year, but it's true. Like it's been a really tough matchup for Arkansas at home and especially at A&M. Like. I don't know. Styles make fights or whatever, but Arkansas struggles with those dudes.
Hey, is Arkansas the most accurately rated team of all time this preseason? Like,
they might be.
They really like. I've not seen one preseason projection of Arkansas besides Norlander, who had them like 78th in the country.
Right.
But every time I see them, I'm like 12. Okay, that's good. 15, 14, 11. Sure, and then like SEC, I see them 2 to 4. Like John said, like anything below. I haven't seen anyone say like they're going to be 8th in the SEC. Like I see them all in that 2 to 4 range. I'm like, every time I see it, I'm like, okay, fair. Like I feel like that's never the case with Arkansas. This year.
It just depends on if they're preparing to win or preparing to develop on these games.
Right.
How many Super Bowls are on the schedule this year? I mean, how many? What's going to be their record in Super Bowls this year?
I see 31 of them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, undefeated.
I see a few non-Super Bowls, but I think we're going to see about 5 or 6 in conference play, maybe. And I see one in late November for sure. There's going to be a Super Bowl.
Yeah, well, and it's funny too because we were talking about non-conference games, and you brought up A&M. I look back; it's like last year. You mentioned them losing to Wofford. Like they also got smoked by Colorado on the road by like
I remember
35.
They gave up like 100.
Yeah, and lost to Boise State handedly. So it's just that to me is always just so fascinating. Where with Arkansas. I think that they lost to Hofstra and Little Rock, and
they lost to Vanderbilt at home, which was at the time was a tough loss.
But as far as like non-conference goes, I feel like has that really been only we'll call it bad loss in the non-conference that Muss has had?
That Oklahoma game, that Oklahoma team wasn't horrible, but the loss itself was a bad loss. They lost by like 30.
Smacked. Yeah.
Musk got ejected. Ronnie Brewer was having to throw him into the locker room. It was tough.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the thing is like there's a method to the madness of the the scheduling that Musk goes through, and that's what is also going to be fascinating about this year's schedules because it's different. This is a different type of schedule than they've gone through because we've talked about the exhibition game and everything. But if you just throw into the mix that like just look at it from the travel perspective. So they got 4 games in Fayetteville, essentially with Alcorn State, Gardner-Webb, Old Dominion, UNC Greensboro. Then they go to the Bahamas and play in that game. Then they return and play Duke, play Duke at home. And then after that, they get a home game against Furman in Fayetteville. Then they go.
Furman's going to be really tough after the Bahamas stretch and Duke. That's going to be you better be ready. It's going
to be extremely tough. And then that next game, they go to Tulsa to play Oklahoma. And then the next game after that, they come to North Little Rock to play Lipscomb.
That's always weird.
Yeah. And then after that, you get 2 more home games in the non-conference. So, this isn't just a long stretch of home games, and then you have a road game or 2 or whatever. This is home games, you're gone, back home, toughest opponent you play on the schedule. Then you got 1 more game against a tough one. Then you go to Tulsa, then you go down to Little Rock. It's all over the place. I don't know if that's a benefit or it's going to be a problem, but I feel like the schedule is definitely different than what Muss has had before.
There's some time in between some of those November, December games though, a week in between.
Yeah, Oklahoma, Lipscomb, there's a week in between. You're right.
Yeah. But I was going to say, in conference, I actually feel the opposite about that. I feel like once you get to conference, that's when it starts to be your tough games are a little bit more spread out. And in the non-conference, it is the travel of it will be tough, but it's not like they're going to have to play someone tough on Thursday and then turn around on Saturday. I think they'll have enough time, and it'll be early enough to where they're still making enough adjustments between each game. I think they'll be able to overcome that a little bit, but it is definitely going to be. We'll learn a lot about this team in the next 6 weeks for sure.
Yeah.
Scottie's right about that Furman game, man. That's going to be a really tricky one, and it is good that they've got a few days, after that Duke game to kind of get ready for that. But that's a lot, man, to go play 3 games in a row against good competition in a unique environment, and then the emotional high from that Duke game and Furman, man. We watched what they did to Virginia last year. They got a lot of dudes coming back. That is a sneaky game, and then. Ruta's kind of the master of getting those mid-majors that are probably going to win their league. If you see any of those, North Carolina directional schools on the schedule, you got to worry about that a little bit. That Greensboro game right before you go to the Bahamas, they almost beat Arkansas last year. And that was the game when Brazil got injured. They got a lot of dudes coming back. That's one you can't overlook. And that Wilmington game, UNC Wilmington's going to be really good. And that's that weird, you had 9 days between games. You went home for Christmas and came back, and it's right before SEC plays. And there's some sneaky, tricky spots for some of these mid majors that kind of, I don't know. I'm not gonna go as far as to say, oh man, this is gonna be an upset, but some of those games where you might see an 18-20 point spread, and you look up at the end of the game, and Arkansas is shooting free throws to kind of clinch it down the stretch.
Well, and that's when they've had their mishaps. Has been that Oklahoma game in early December. Hofstra was December 16th or something like that. They had another weird Little Rock game, I feel like, under Muss, where it's that December game. Those games are usually when they have their banana peel moments. So yeah.
It's like the baseball team and the basketball team. Whenever they come to North Little Rock, it's just weird and dumb.
When the cameras are turned off and you can't find the game anywhere on TV, that's when they play their worst.
Hey, they're apparently streaming it this time. It's going to be on TV this year, apparently. Sources say. But even so, and I talked to Ellis because he comes on my show, 103.7 The Buzz, every week now. And I just got done interviewing him before we started this. And I just asked him about because he was bringing up, a Monday game, how weird it is for him, playing on a Monday. But I laughed because I was like, okay, so as a player, do you have a particular day of the week or time that you prefer? Obviously I feel like Saturdays at night would be the best. And yeah, he's like, yeah, man. He's like, the night is where it's at. But he's like, but I saw on our schedule this year, we got a lot of 11 a.m. games, man. And I ain't feeling that. And so I looked at it, I was like, there is quite a few 11 a.m. Saturday games for Arkansas this year. And I don't know if that's common to what it was last year, but if you think just in the SEC, and in those games, as far as what's been scheduled, the South Carolina game at home in Fayetteville is at 11 a.m. Or that's actually at noon, so we'll call it there. But that game's at noon. You got LSU on the road at 11 a.m. You got Mississippi State on the road at 11 a.m. You got Missouri at home at 11 a.m. And you also have Alabama, the one on the road. The finale is at 11 a.m. So
Okay, now that is where you avoid Dixon the night before.
yes,
If we're gonna worry about it, that's when you worry.
You're
about
not
it.
buying my Micah Mitchell a drink at JJ's if you see him the day before that one.
yes, yeah, that would be
like playing, like it being kind of weird playing a Monday game. Guess what day that Furman game's on?
Monday.
Monday.
Someone asked earlier if there was a guaranteed L. Furman. That's it. That's the one.
It's Furman the one.
Guaranteed.
Oh, God.
I look at the schedule and I say L. That's the one. Furman.
I really do like their coach a lot. I'm like halfway surprised he is not already in charge of like a Power 5 school.
Was Furman the school that Musk coached from like it was during COVID or what? No, that was Abilene Christian where he like coached. He was like did the broadcast because he couldn't go to the game because he had COVID.
Yeah, that was Abilene Christian.
It wasn't
David Patrick game. Yeah.
Yep. And then the next year was when he couldn't do the game because of his shoulder, and he was calling in on the LSU game, and he was pissed. You could tell. It's like, man, I did not like. He's glad they won, but he was not very happy that he was not there for the win. Like he was not too thrilled.
He was
so, yeah. Because also, like, do you guys remember? Speaking of that, do you guys remember when they tried to do, or when Musk got asked about like playing during the COVID when people would have games canceled, like trying to play Arkansas State, and then like the Arkansas State coach was kind of like snarky about it. Do you remember that? And
I do remember, yeah.
He was like, they were trying to like, oh, hey, you're open, we're open, we're doing that. Like, but Musk never even responded. It was just the Arkansas State coach came out. I don't even remember his name, but he's just like, we're not just gonna come calling at the beck and call whenever we're available. I'm like, and Musk's like, okay, like whatever you want to do.
Cross him off the list, Ruda.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Which, by the way, David says on our comments, he says, is Ruda still doing the schedule? He is indeed.
He's not giving that thing up.
No.
Now they did but I think Todd Lee was the man behind the Purdue game, right? Isn't that what Musk said? So he got that exhibition. I'm sure he probably has more help with that now than he did before because he's got different responsibilities. But that's his baby, Like
they're playing some of the same
teams.
It's not like they're scanning the country for these. It's like they're just calling. They're like, hey, you want to play again? We'll play again.
Oh, he's scanning, brother. And you know what else about Ruda is funny? Like I think it was definitely the COVID year. And the year right after that, he nailed it. Like with his bracketology, like he knew exactly the seed Arkansas was going to be and exactly who they were going to play before it happened. That's hard to do, man. Especially like if I'm, game planning for the SEC tournament or whatever. Like I'm not thinking about that stuff, but he's on it, man. So I don't know how his brain works, man. But
and speaking of bracketology, he pretty much picked every non-conference team that Arkansas played that one year. Ended up winning their conference. Like North Texas won their conference. Abilene Christian won their conference.
Yeah.
I feel like there were a couple other ones that Oral Roberts, like pretty much their entire strength of schedule. It just was awesome that year.
Yeah.
And so it's like, that's a big deal, whenever you're able to pick those teams. And I feel like someone also mentioned in the comments that this is like a professional schedule. And that he's glad it wasn't last year's team that had it. And I think that's something they definitely think about, when they played that Purdue game. I guarantee you they thought about like, hey, is this team going to get embarrassed if we schedule this game? And I think that's definitely something that they take into account. And I'm not saying every single game they're scheduling it for that reason, but I think that Musk knows what this team can do. And so I think this schedule is one that he'll enjoy watching his team go through.
And I'm also curious, what are y'all thoughts on, this is going to be random, but the college basketball report social media, is that like anything legit? Like you guys know anything about it?
I see it tagged on our message board a lot, but I just don't click on it.
Well, the only reason I ask is because like they just put out like literally today about ranking the SEC basketball coaches right now, and they have Eric Musselman at number 1. So that was some I'm sure will be.
I mean, if this is
not debated,
this is a real.
I'm going to retweet that real quick.
I already did.
Twitter account that we're talking about here. Why doesn't he go ahead and rank all of the basketball student sections before
good
season starts? Like, just go ahead and do something like that.
Yeah. Or like the ones that's got the cleanest bathrooms, and just get a bunch of retweets because it's like, oh yeah, this guy knows, because he's
every college town's favorite burger spot.
Yeah, just based on me reaching up into my rectum and pulling it out. Like,
they did barbecue, right? And it was like Penguin Ed's or something.
Yeah, Penguin
Hey,
Ed's.
listen, I go to Penguin Ed's, and it's good, but come on, man. Like,
I forgot there was one that came up when it was the most absurd thing I've ever seen in my life. But it was about Arkansas. It was like, what was the things like the go-to sports bar And it was brought up one, and I don't even know if it was like one. I'm like, I grew up in Fayetteville, and I don't even remember ever going there and like even knowing it existed. It was something like that. But no, they did have Muss at number 1, then Calipari at 2, Rick Barnes at 3, Nate Oates at 4, and Chris Beard at 5.
I feel like if you're going to put Calipari at 2, you got to put him at like 7. You know what I mean? Like if you're not, because I mean, if you're not going to take into account his like resume and what he's done, then he's not. Then he's not number 1, okay, but then he must be like 7 or something like that.
We got him 2 for this recruiting.
If you're
class.
basing it off of like last year, he's nowhere near 2. You know what I mean? Like, so that is weird.
Pretty class heavy, it feels like.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a problem. Obviously, I don't have a problem with Muss being number 1, but like, I mean, Chris Beard at number 5 makes sense. He had Bruce Pearl at 6 and Buzz Williams at 7, and then Chris Jans, then Dennis Gates, then Jerry Stackhouse. So
some good coaches in the league, man.
I was there's a good coach. I mean, think about how different that is from like 7 years ago. If you just just look at the coaches in the SEC.
Will Wade, the Will Wade days.
Yeah, Will Wade was like a top 4 coach in the league, man. He was like running shit.
Was it Jeff Lebo? Was that his name? He's like at Auburn way back when.
You had Andy Kennedy cooking at Ole Miss. They went 16-12, 19 straight years at one point, I think.
Oh my goodness gracious! Yeah,
the dude at was it Barbie? Tony
Barbie, yeah. Tony Barbie, yeah. He was at Auburn for a bit, and I think honestly, I thought Anthony Grant was there for Bama. He was pretty good, or like he was decent, I should say.
Remember when Martin Johnson was there?
Yeah, Avery Johnson was at Bama. Yeah.
Buckle your seatbelt. So we just kept saying about that. Yeah, him and I'm trying to think of. Remember, because there were some coaches that just were there for a long time, which weren't great. Like, but they just there. Like Andy Kennedy, he was okay, but he was there for like a decade.
Shout out to Tom Crean getting Anthony Edwards to Georgia, though.
Yeah, man.
Shout out to Tom Crean because he convinced me that during that season that Anthony Edwards wasn't good because I watched Georgia a lot and I was like, damn, I don't know, like this kid, I just don't know. It turns out he's awesome and they couldn't do anything with him.
Didn't he also get Contavious Caldwell Pope there too?
Like I think that was before Crean's time, right? That was like
that's right. That was Mark. What was his name? Oh man, I can see his face.
Mark. What is his
Mark?
Name?
Fox.
Mark Fox.
Fox.
Yep.
Yes, Fox.
Yeah. Now
they had a Jody. Not Jody Meeks. There was another guard that went to Georgia around the same time as Contavious Caldwell Pope that like led the league in scoring. And but I don't know. Yeah, Georgia's had random good talent here and there.
Yeah, that's always my favorite game is to like name random SEC basketball players of like the mid 2000s and stuff.
Yeah, we did that on the way to and from Des Moines, man.
Yeah, hey, I'll tell you who I thought was going to be good in the SEC, Mike White, who ended up at Florida. And he was at Louisiana Tech, and I remember people at Louisiana Tech talking about this dude like he was God, So I really thought he was about to. I thought he was going to end up getting like the Duke job. I thought he would be Coach K's successor, and it just didn't work out for him.
Hey, credit to him though. Like I don't think Georgia's going to be very good this year, despite Norlander having him picked ahead of Arkansas. But
that is
he is killing it on the recruiting trail. Like killing it on the recruiting trail right now. He just got a 5-star. Like he's going to wind up having a top 10 class. I don't know. Maybe he's on the Anthony Edwards Kool-Aid,
That's a good spot.
It is a really good spot for him. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's well spoken too. Like I thought he did a good job at SEC Media Days. Scottie was talking about the point that Lamont Paris made, but Mike White had a good one too, where they asked him about like, hey, you guys are picked 13th in the preseason and in the SEC. And he was like, yeah, that's true. But we're also, in the top 60 at KenPom. And so basically like the team that's picked, next to last in the SEC is basically a bubble team. If you look at it from that standpoint for the NCAA tournament, I like it though, because you go in with that ammunition, like, probably sports information directors or whatever, like talking to them on the flight over, like they're going to ask you about being projected to suck. Okay. So how are we going to spin this? And so they go in there with that ammo. It's kind of cool to see some of the stuff they come up with. There's always optimism.
I love a coach citing KenPom as a sign that his team is about to go off.
I love it, man.
Hey, top 60.
But did you look at KenPom though? Yeah.
It's like citing Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Like,
well, Muss is a big KenPom enthusiast. I've talked to Muss about his KenPom. You can always get a reaction from Muss if you say something about KenPom.
He knows.
Do we have any thoughts on Missouri? Because I just looked up and down their roster.
No, actually, we don't.
No. They finished 9th in the league. And I just don't know.
I have on my power ranking, they're 10th, so I don't know about that. But
I do like Dennis Gates, but it's just I don't know. Like I think about that style that they played last year. I don't know if that's what he's trying to do, like that super up tempo kind of stuff. But it Connor Vanover seems like a a weird fit for that. Like, I'm happy to see him back in
Not
the
a
SEC,
fast-paced
but
guy, you wouldn't say?
no, I mean, unless you're just having him run like arc to arc, you know, like, hey, you're the trailer man, and we're just gonna let you shoot some threes and then go protect the rim. But I don't know.
He's totally gonna remember how to shoot. By the way, he's gonna be raining threes at Missouri.
Oh, can't wait. It's
Did
gonna
he
be
shoot
great.
it well last year at Oral
He
Roberts?
did. At least at one point, when I checked his game log in like January, he was shooting it well. So if it changed since then, I don't know.
It's also funny to me because like I don't know if you guys remember this, but it's like it reminds me of when Nolan Richardson brought in Jason Jennings, like this 7-foot guy from Bald Knob, and everyone's like, "What? Like, who? Why is this gonna work? This isn't gonna work in the system." It was just so strange, but it may end up working out for him. I guess we'll have to wait and see. By the way, it's still before we move on, I always love to make sure I mention one of my favorite numbers is that St. Peter's has been to as many Elite Eights as both Tennessee and Alabama.
Ever?
Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
Yep. Alabama's been to one Elite Eight, and that was in 2004.
Who was on that Alabama team?
Oh God, who cares? Like, I don't even know.
I'm just trying to think. Like, they had to have had an NBA guy, right?
You would think.
I mean, I don't know because that wasn't like that wasn't Mo Williams and stuff, right? Was
Hey,
it?
by the way, I don't know if Alabama was an example of this. You remember when the SEC used to do that thing where a team would win the conference tournament, like a team with like 6 conference wins would win the conference tournament? Arkansas did it that one time, or they at least like got to the title game or whatever. But it's like that would happen like every other year where there would just be like a random team. Like I remember Georgia winning it that one year. They beat Arkansas in the title game, but it's like it felt like that was a thing that happened all the time. When's the last time that's happened where a team is really like Missouri goes into the tournament as the 10 seed and wins it?
I'm not sure.
In a minute.
If that's not happening, then what are we doing the conference tournaments for real?
I know that like Arkansas's record in all their athletic department and state and the SEC title tournament games is like the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. Like the soccer team lost again today, and they've gone to 7 of 8. They've gone to 7 of the last 8 SEC tournament championship games and have lost them all. And it's been to 7 different teams. How does that happen?
Mike Anderson went to back-to-back, didn't he? At one point, back-to-back SEC title games.
Yeah, because they got smoked by that Kentucky team that was undefeated, and that's when what's her face wanted to like take on the whole
Ashley Judd.
Ashley Judd. God, she sucks. It's like you haven't heard from her since they were so good
since now, probably.
Yeah, it's like so that was the case. I was trying to see. I was looking back on the SEC tournament. We can do this and we can move on. But the SEC tournament champions, I guess maybe. Yeah,
I can't name them, dude. I'm telling you, I don't. Once Arkansas gets eliminated, I have no idea what happens in that tournament. I remember Bama beating LSU one year in the championship game.
Who won it last year?
Bama did.
A&M.
Bama.
Nate Oates is racking them up.
I mean, I know the only reason I know that is because that's what Alabama fans care the most about. They're like, "Hey, where's your banner?" It's like,
fair enough.
Yeah, sorry. Like that was the funniest thing last year is when I had Auburn fans. Like the guy literally like sent a picture of the banner that was hanging up when they went to the Final Four, and he's like, He's like, yeah, because you guys hadn't had one of these, and I'm not kidding. It was hanging by itself, and I'm like, yeah, there's great picture of that. You've just proved my point. You have one banner sitting there. It's like it's almost lonely up there. It almost looks like you just started your basketball program. But I didn't realize like Kentucky's won it 4. They won it 4 times in a row there for a bit on a long stretch.
Wow.
Honestly, it's the last team that may have done it was probably that Ole Miss team when they had Marshall Henderson back in 2013.
Dude, Marshall Henderson was the man, dude. He was so awesome.
That was such a trash talker too, man.
I love
Marshall
Henderson, dude.
All right, so moving on. I know people want to get into that. I wanted to do some of like Bet Saracen specials because I know we like to talk about the side of gambling and doing in sports stuff and everything now that's legal in the state of Arkansas. And of course, the Bet Saracen app is the way to go. But there is a few things that are happening when it comes to like when they look at for Arkansas. Like they're already got Arkansas minus 23.5 against Alcorn State, and the over being
they're gonna cover that by 15 points.
They can pick their score in that game.
You think so?
They show up. Yeah, I mean, if they come and sleepwalk, like whatever. But if they're locked in, come on.
Here's how you know they're going to kill them. Musk tried to convince us the other day that they were like this elite rebounding team that was about to give Arkansas hell on the boards. So it's like I feel like you don't slip up this early. Like maybe if they caught him on a different night, but it's like game 1. Unless Arkansas just completely doesn't show up, and
Well, I did love like when I was talking with Ellis again earlier. He talked about Alcorn State. They got some dogs. He said they're really good.
Got some dogs.
And he went through the preparation that they've had to do with games, and he's just like, I can tell you everything about everybody, about every single player, and all of that. So,
I feel like dudes like him and Caleb and like all these guys, they probably like this, And so it's like I think they're still having fun with it. It hasn't gotten annoying yet. So I feel like if they're gonna slip up, it's not gonna be here.
No.
I just want to throw out there that in Alcorn State's exhibition win over Division II Miles College last week, they tied on the glass, 32-32. So.
No, when I was
they were athletic
last week about the spread, I hadn't even seen one come out yet, and I put it at 32.5, and then it comes in like 8 or 9 under that. So yeah, I like that. I like the number.
Yeah, they also have a really good. I think it's a good special. Like it's regular season conference winner parlay, and for plus 2,000, if Arkansas wins the regular season in the SEC, the Big 12 is Kansas, and the AEC is Vermont. That plus 2,000.
I like that.
Yeah.
When does Vermont not come out of that league? When do they not come out of the league?
Yeah, Vermont. That's Vermont and Kansas are almost locks, man.
Vermont will be like minus 1,800 to win that league.
Conferences where the conference championship game is played on like the better seeded team's home floor.
Yeah.
Well, there's only like 5 teams in that conference, right?
It's
literally like only a few. So it's like I feel like there's a decent chance they'll win that.
Well, and another one too is actually double the odds. Is at plus 4,000. ACC winner regular season again, Duke. Big East is UConn, and the SEC is Arkansas at plus 4,000.
Saracen just raking in.
Dude, that's a tease. That's such a tease to it. But what's funny is they actually. So this is actually the longest shot of the parlays they have. At plus 10,000, you'd have the Big Ten winner be Purdue. The Big East be Marquette, the SEC be Texas A&M, and the AAC be Memphis. So,
if you're just a guy who is really confident Arkansas is winning the SEC, I mean, I just told you 20 minutes ago that they were going to. So, I mean, you might as well go ahead and, combine them with every conference title winner possible.
Yeah. I think we actually talked about this in a comment because it's like over under one coach must ejection. It was like we set that.
We said it at 1.5, I think.
Yeah, but I think
maybe
it's for both
2.5
players and coaches though. Like we had combined. So, but
yeah,
1.5's good. We put we're putting it at a half. Muss is going to get ejected at one point this year, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I'd be disappointed if he didn't. So
I think you'll get one player.
But it'll have to be during the the non-con, right? He ain't doing it in a conference game.
I think
Right.
Devo's gonna choke out a Furman guy. Put him in a full body triangle and everything, and I think he'll get ejected. And Muss will get ejected from the Duke game to inspire a run.
Yeah, you get ejected from
Alabama. That'd be electric.
I'd say get ejected from Alabama when he does like a stone cold stunner on like Nate Oates or something like that.
Hey, has there ever been a better coach ejection than Cal's at Bud Walton a few years back?
No,
probably not.
That was an awesome, and I mean it was awesome like in the moment because it was like Cal getting ejected. You had DVH waving him goodbye. But then the way that Cal like played his part of it, and obviously it worked for his team. Great execution all the way around. That was the best coach ejection of all time.
That's Kenny Payne's best win of his whole career.
Yeah.
Kenny Payne's
one of like
Man.
3. Yeah.
I mean, it got him a job.
like, dude, and like I hate to put it this way, but since you brought up we all know about coaching trees. Does John Calipari have the worst head coaching tree like of guys under him of anybody? Because I feel like Kenny Payne is a disaster. Like Tony Barbie was a disaster.
I was trying to think who's the success story. I mean,
what's what I'm asking? Like, I don't know if he has one. Are you talking about just in general of any coach?
No, I know there's some coaches that have some trees. I'm trying to think of John Calipari's tree, and I'm like, who's the one like guy where it's like, oh, well, at least he has him. Like, does he have one?
I mean, unless he has one back in his Memphis days or UMass that I'm not aware of. I don't know. But
the best shots are the guys that are on his staff right now, but they're not gonna leave Kentucky. For probably
he's got to hope that Shea Gilgeous-Alexander gets in the coaching. That'll do it.
Yeah, or his son. His son apparently is in the league working his way up as we speak with Vandy, right?
That's right.
I think so. Yeah, I think
Big
that's the case.
Development guy, B-Rad.
Josh Pastner. Is he still coaching it? Is he get fired?
Georgia Tech?
Still wearing the face shield at Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
Nah. He did wear that.
Oh my gosh, yes, forgot about that. Yeah, because I forgot that. Yeah, I guess he was there when Mason Jones hit the the game winner, the 3-point shot game winner.
Thanksgiving.
Banked in. Yeah.
Yeah, my favorite thing about that was the overtime score was 3-2, and both buckets were scored in the final 20 seconds of that. So high end stuff there. All right, so before we get to more comments, which I know we'll get to, folks, recruiting updates. Now this is something everybody likes to talk about. So Jalen Shelley, I think, is of course a big one, and we know there's always in the mix for players and stuff, but. Kind of what's the situation with Jalen Shelley, and kind of because I believe what was it, a visit he came on this past weekend or the weekend ago? Can't remember, but it was here recently. I know that.
Yeah, no, Shelley was the first commitment in the 24 class for these guys. He was back. I think he was at the Purdue game. But yeah, everything's good with him. I first of all, I really like him. He's kind of the prototypical Eric Musselman wing. He's like 6'8". Super long, can defend. He's right up the road at Link Academy. You've already got that pipeline, so that's great. But I think he's going to sign, sometime this week. I think the early signing period starts on Wednesday, and it lasts a week. And so he's going to sign. I think they're going to do it similar to the way they did with Jordan Walsh, because Link has like 15 Division I players, and so they just put all their seniors at a table and kind of go across and they sign their letters of intent, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I think they're all set there. Isaiah Elohim is the other 2024 commit. Really interesting dude. I mean, he's a 6'5" wing at 24/7 Sports. He was a top 5 player like a year and a half ago. He's dealt with some injuries. He had a weird transfer situation. And so I think he's still top 40 in our composite rankings, but I mean, obviously he's an elite level talent. Sierra Canyon kid, right? So he was teammate with Bronny James last year and all that. I texted him on Friday and he said he's still trying to work out the details and he'll let me know about, the early signing stuff, but people don't need to panic about that. I feel like if you guys remember, Moses Moody waited, and everybody was freaked out about it, but it's a week-long period and, families and kids care about this stuff, right? Layden Blocker had a big ceremony at Bordino's last year. It was awesome. You got to go out and his dad handed me a piece of cheesecake. It was great, man. So, people do that kind of stuff. They want to do it in front of their families or set something up at their school or whatever. So if it opens on Wednesday and you're not seeing a bunch of signatures, it's nothing to worry about. I think those guys are solid, but I do think it's interesting from a recruiting standpoint, probably unless something changes here, probably just going to be a 2-man class of freshmen for 2024. Do we think that's where this is headed? Maybe 2 to 3 high school guys, because you got to have room for the portal, man. I think just, the experience and kind of where the game is going, you can get Ellis's of the world, and I understand development and everything like that, but especially with Muss, I feel like we've probably seen our last 6-man freshman class, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I mean, I think if you want to learn about Arkansas's recruiting, just turn on the TV and watch college basketball, and you just look around, look at the Big East. Who's the best players in the Big East? That's who who you see a wing shooter you like, see some skill sets. Just go recruit yourself. Do what you got to do. Just turn on the TV and watch college basketball. That's your recruiting.
Every team that comes in Bud Walton Arena, bro, we had it a couple years ago. How many threads did we have started on the message boards? It's that Trevin Brazil guy, Oh, here
Grant
he is.
Nelson was another one.
Grant Nelson last year. Exactly.
Jalen Tate came to Bud Walton Arena. Stanley Amude, all these guys, they're just adding them to the database.
Yeah.
I see a question here in the comments that says, wants to know about the Crutchfield and Boateng, both those guys going to Missouri. I think you should be a lot more worried about the Crutchfield one. That's my opinion.
Agreed. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, but just, looking at it, so Arkansas's got the 2 commitments in Shelley and Elohim, and, they're both big wings, kind of same position as Boateng. And I like Boateng a lot. I think he's a nice player, but they're similarly ranked, similar size, similar positions. You can't have, 3 wings that kind of look exactly the same when he's going to go out and get another guy in the portal that's exactly like that. So I think part of it's a space issue. I would like to see him maybe go somewhere else besides Missouri personally, but I think he'll do well there. The Crutchfield thing, man, that was tough. What was it, 5 minutes before kickoff? That's tough, brother.
Yeah.
Well, going back to the recruiting of small classes, I think it just gives you more flexibility going into the offseason. And we learned that last year. I mean, you're starting to look at the roster and you're doing the math of how many scholarships and all that. Like, I think teams would just prefer to have that flexibility. And so it's like, as many freshmen as you bring in, that's just less spots for you to fill. So it's kind of less experimentation for you in the portal. You just don't have as much flexibility or you got to have some uncomfortable conversations. And I just think it's going to be a weird balance. And we know that Muss isn't going to abandon high school recruiting altogether. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how they play it, of like how selective they are, which recruits they bring in and why they're bringing them in. And, I think it's interesting to see some of these guys like Joseph Pinion, who they're keeping around. And I think this is an important year for Joseph, because if you're able to really develop Joseph Pinion and have him take a step forward as a sophomore, and then maybe you get him back as a junior and even more, it helps you a little bit more in recruiting to have a guy like that to point to. Because you look around the country, I mean, there's not that many dudes that teams are truly developing year to year. And so it's like, those are still important guys for your program. And so I think it's going to be huge for them to kind of be selective and show that they can bring on some freshmen that are more developmental pieces. Obviously, if they can get a big fish, they're going to try and get a Ron Holland type of guy. And so it's going to be fun to see over the next few years just kind of how committed they are to going after these freshmen when you know that you're going to have the safety net of the transfer portal and kind of that flexibility that comes with it in the offseason.
And Keon Minifield is not on scholarship this year. So assuming that he sticks around, he's going to be a guy that, takes up a scholarship next season too. So that's almost like, adding another guy.
Well,
yeah, like a 5-star guy. I mean, he's pretty, we use the word electric. Like I think he kind of embodies that, man. He's going to be a really nice player, especially if he puts on a little bit of weight. I forget about him sometimes. It's hard, it's hard not to when we don't get to see him play. But yeah, that was a hell of a pickup in the offseason. I think he would have helped him this year. If he kind of takes that, that JD Notae route, he's going to be a nice piece.
He impressed me more than anybody in the one practice we went to. Like, my opinion of him changed more in that one practice of like getting to talk to him and see what he's about and just kind of see him play, pick up with some of those dudes. Like, oh man, like you see how he's going to be able to help him. And I'll be interested to see how he attacks this year, because I do agree that he's a guy that he's a piece I'm interested to see next season for sure.
And I'll throw in this too, because we were talking about just freshman recruiting. This is not an indictment against Muss, but it's just a reality. Like, just going back and then looking at the freshman classes that Muss has had. I mean, his first one, I think we all agree, was probably his best one when it came to the impact. You had Moses Moody and Jalen Williams and Devo Davis, like his first real one, full one. And KK Robinson, yeah, he didn't play. But it's like Moses Moody was a great one and done player and like lived up to that expectation. And then Jalen and Devo, it's amazing Devo's still there.
Not a bad class for sure.
Yeah, not a bad class. But it's like he relied on 3 of those players that year as true freshmen to carry a huge load, and they answered the call. But then the next year, it's like, Chance Moore. It's like, okay, that guy didn't have an impact at all. And then you think about the next year, of course, with Nick Smith, Anthony Black, Jordan Walsh. I didn't get to see much of Nick Smith, and Jordan Walsh really didn't come on until later. But Ford, Dunning, and Pinion didn't even play a role. And then you, of course, got this year, which we'll see with Bayfall and Layden Blocker. But the point is like, because of that transfer portal and Muss doing so well, it's like you've still had a lot of success in winning 8 NCAA tournament games, but it hasn't been based solely on you getting freshmen. Like, oh man, we missed out on this guy. It's like, okay, I mean, yeah, but nice, but the results are still there. Like, just because you're missing out on guys, I would rather have, no offense to anybody, but it's like, I would rather have a player like, as much as I love like a Devo Davis and Jalen Williams freshman, I'd rather have a Justin Smith. I'd rather have one of those guys, an Ellis or a Caliph Battle or, Tremont Mark. I'd rather have those guys than get a true freshman. It's just the nature of the beast. Like,
yeah, definitely love having a guy like Tremont Mark on your roster who's been to he's familiar with all of the stages that Arkansas wants to get to.
Yeah.
Like, he's been to a Final Four, been to an Elite Eight, been to a Sweet 16. Like, whenever he gets on those stages, it's not going to be brand new to him. That can be invaluable. Don't want to get too coachy, but like, leadership is a big deal. And like, if you've been there before, you can speak with some authority on that. And it's a player voice. Guys can get, maybe burned out listening to coaching voices, but if it's another guy on the roster saying it and he's saying with some authority and he's got, games to back it up with, that's big time. So yeah, definitely over a freshman.
Yeah.
I'll also add that it's such a weird I don't know, like compromise that you have to make when you're evaluating some of these kids. Like if you can take, obviously the 5-star McDonald's All-American one and done freshman, sure, great. But with these other guys, it is tricky because like Andrew said, like the Joseph Pinions of the world are few and far between. I think there's like 8 guys in the SEC who've been at their same school for 4 years now. So, if you take some of these freshmen who maybe aren't, the 5-star prospects, like you can get the guys in the 25 to 75 range that can be really good players and can be pros. But like, how do you approach those conversations of like, hey, here's our plan for you. This is where we think you're at. We want to develop you and get you ready to go. In year 2, year 3, whatever. That's tricky because there's nothing keeping them from going throughout their freshman year and being like, you know what, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, or I should have been playing over this guy or that guy. They're going to bring in a transfer. Screw this. I'm out. Then you spend a year developing a player for somebody else. And so it goes both ways. We hear all the time about, did they process this guy or process that guy? Well, it works on the other end of it too, where you might be invested in someone for a 4-year future or whatever, but they can leave whenever they want and be eligible at their next stop. So, it just makes it difficult. I think, it would for me as a coach to be like, okay, do I take that risk and hope that it pans out over the course of 3 or 4 years? Or do I go pick up a guy out of the transfer portal who's in the exact same situation somewhere else that can come help me right now? It's tricky, man. It really is. So, but I like, like seeing Darian Ford being at Arkansas State now, for example, and he's put up, 20 some odd points in their exhibition games. Like, I love seeing that. Chance Moore is balling up in Springfield and Missouri State right now. Like that's really cool. I like to see that. But it would be cool to see, guys be able to stick around for 3 or 4 years and do it in a Razorback uniform. I think people assume that they just get, recruited over or whatever. Sometimes that's the case, sure. But in other cases, they might be fully invested in a dude and he just dips out. That's just the lay of the land right now.
Yeah. I think they need to get the drafting stash going. You know how the NBA had that going for a while where like they draft dudes, they don't come over. Send them to Slovakia for a couple of years and work on their post game and then bring them back when they're ready. I think they need to develop that. Have JUCO is obviously just not a thing in college basketball at this point. It's like, just not a realistic. I mean, people come from JUCO, Mason Jones, obviously, but it's like, I wish there was like some system where it's like Arkansas could maybe send guys to somewhere for 1 year and kind of monitor their progress or whatever. So it's like, I know that sucks because that makes me sound like that's what smaller schools have been reduced to at this point in the modern college sports landscape. But I do think it's like, you do wish there were easier ways to go about this process of handling the roster rather than just having uncomfortable on a conversation after uncomfortable conversation each offseason.
Yeah, and another thing too, because we'll get to some of the questions as well coming up, but I think it is like needless to say, it's funny just to see how college basketball has changed so much and the players that come in because what it meant to get a 5-star player, McDonald's All-American player, and just that you're going to build the roster around that player and it's going to be the difference maker on that team. And now it's like, yeah, they may play, maybe, but they may not be good. They may not even get any minutes. Who knows? Like, it's just crazy how it's changed. They changed everything. So, all right. So we got a bunch of questions that we'll try to get to, or at least comments. Some of them will be. Josh says, thank you all for doing this show. You're welcome, Josh.
Took a lot of hard work for us to get here. I mean, we're grinding away. This is not fun for us at all. So I hope you know that.
Yeah. We were like literally suffering and torturing ourselves in this. Ray says New York Post has Hogs in the Final Four along with Duke, North Carolina, Creighton. Final Four would be great. Well, if the New York Post has it,
I agree that would be
sold.
Great.
Yeah. I mean, I think we'd sign up for that. But you know what? I mean, I'd take a Final Four, but dadgum well, man. It's
they
like
lose to North Carolina. Is that what
they're going to lose to North Carolina or Duke because they're going to be so obsessed of making sure that it's Duke, North Carolina in that national championship game.
Well, and then they're going to know what's going to happen is they'll lose to a team they beat in the regular season, and then we'll have to do that where it's like Muss lost his postseason fastball. He lost, couldn't do it when the brights were, the lights were brightest. I mean.
And just from a coverage standpoint of it, I'd be a little bit ticked off if Arkansas was in the same Final Four as Duke and North Carolina because nobody would give a about Arkansas or Creighton, right? Like nobody would care about that except all of us in Arkansas. Like spread it out a little bit.
Hopefully the matchups would be like Arkansas, Duke.
I hope so.
Yeah.
And then people would be. I guess it would kind of be cool though because then if Arkansas say they beat Duke or North Carolina, and they ruin that, dream national championship matchup, then, Arkansas could go into the title game being the villain. I think Muss would lean all the way into that, so that'd be kind of fun.
You got storylines with each of those teams. It's losing to Creighton and Maui last year, controversially. North Carolina with the 2017 NCAA tournament game, and then Duke. Whatever happens this year when those two teams play, it's revenge factor for
and history with them. I mean, they could play North Carolina and Atlantis too, so it's like
I could see both of them.
It could be Carolina.
Might already have the scouting reports booked out.
Yeah. No, I'm just laughing because I know if it ended up being Duke and everything, you still have the National College of Basketball be like, this is his best interview he's ever done. His press conference is just my goodness. If only Coach K could see this today, it'd be incredible. And I just want to punch myself in the face. As long as we don't have idiot media members that, actually start asking questions to the coaches first instead of the players like they're supposed to, and then it loses it for everybody else. But that's probably why certain ones aren't employed anymore. Let's see. So we're going to go with Thomas. Says, I feel like a Sweet 16 would be a disappointment for me. Says, I probably wouldn't necessarily complain about it, but I definitely wish we'd go further than that.
I also hate the Sweet 16.
I'm tired of it. I'm over it.
That's where Eric's got it. Arkansas hadn't been there since 96 before Eric got here. And now they're so used to going there. It's old news now.
Yeah.
So you exceed that. But I mean,
it is a fair question. How many, second weekends does Eric Musselman have to take the Razorbacks to without a Final Four before people start going,
he's stuck?
Is he just a setup man? Who's the closer? What are we doing here?
Yep.
Middle relief Muss. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. People are just going to start throwing out the most absurd things, comparisons and stuff. It's going to be he's just like Florida State's baseball coach, went to 11 daggum World Series and couldn't win it.
What would be so funny is if Arkansas won the SEC regular season and the tournament and had the player of the year and then lost in the Sweet 16.
Oh, that'd be hysterical.
That would be crazy.
That'd be the funniest thing I've ever heard in my life.
And had a player arrested.
Tough stuff, man.
Well, as long as he doesn't help commit murder.
It's a hell of a problem to have. Now,
as long as you don't have one help him, that would be huge.
Right. Hey, Sweet 16 at least though for me, because that means multiple trips to some, crazy
the
place.
Extra weekend cannot be over. You cannot overemphasize how big that extra weekend is. Having a week in between,
Yeah.
Yeah. And also it's about the sites that they're at, man, 3 of the 4 at least would be pretty cool. Dallas would be just cool if for travel purposes, but man, playing where the Celtics play or playing where the Lakers play. I guess we'll try to figure out how we can make that work.
Cool.
Yeah. So let's see. This comes from I don't even know something Eagle. I'm not going to try to pronounce that. Is it possible that Devo is the 4th or 5th best player on the roster? Not hating on Devo. I'm just asking if that's possible since we brought so much talent in. I think it's true, right?
It's possible there might be some clouds in the sky tomorrow too. What are we saying? What's the question here? Are we saying he's not the 4th or 5th best player on the team? We're saying he's lower or higher than that?
I think there's probably an assumption that he's,
higher.
Yeah. Just as a returner,
and he's all SEC
4th year guy, all SEC guy, the March Madness pedigree and all that.
The all SEC team, they literally just you have to be a returner basically, right? I mean, Desi Sills was preseason all SEC one year, right?
No, he was.
He was literally second team all SEC one year.
Man,
the preseason all SEC team does not mean anything.
Here's what I want to see. No, it doesn't. Here's what I want to see with Devo is you don't have to be March Devo in November and December, but can you be the SEC version of Devo we had last year in November and December? That was one of the things I had listed as, what to watch for in this game against Alcorn State, because it's kind of been a quiet preseason. He was pretty good against UT Tyler or whatever, but it would be nice. We're kind of playing up this narrative, right? Of, hey, 4th year senior returner. That's the kind of guy that a lot of championship teams have on their roster, but can he play like it from day one, throughout the course of the season? I'd love to see more consistency out of him. I think he's obviously a really good player. I don't know how I would rank the Arkansas basketball team in terms of who the best players are right now, but I think just from a continuity and leadership standpoint, I expect, if Arkansas is going to do the things that I think they're capable of this year, Devo takes a step forward and it starts with being consistent from start to finish for me.
And I think Go ahead,
fourth
Scottie.
best. I think him being like maybe the fourth or fifth best guy kind of validates what Ellis said last week about in like years down the line, decades down the line, it's going to be just kind of hard to explain who Devo was, because he could be your best player, and then sometimes he could be like a guy that you might be better off not playing, and then the March Devo happens, and we're talking about him like March Devo is a real thing, but yeah, I mean,
legend.
Well, and I think value is a little, you could make a case he's more valuable than fourth or fifth. He might be, in terms of just like irreplaceable guys of like, he's going to be there. So I could see that. But I mean, if you're just talking about like talent or like best players on the team, like, I mean, he's not better than Caleb Battle. He's not better than Trevin Brazil. I mean, Tremont Mark, they're pretty similar in terms of just everything. But I mean, fourth or fifth seems about right?
If there's a couple of us playing pickup and we're picking a team, he probably is like the fourth.
Yeah, he's like the fifth pick.
Taken.
Yeah.
I mean, but I hope I'm not sounding like I'm anti-Devo. I love Devo.
No.
Like I just think like I feel like
this is a good team.
This is a good team. Yeah. To answer your question, I guess yes, it's very possible, and I think we are in that reality right now.
Because it kind of makes me think, and we could always play this what if game and everything, but it makes me wonder, like, say if on this team right now you had a Bobby Portis as a freshman, like what ranking would Bobby Portis as a freshman be on this team? Like, I don't think he'd be the best.
And I think he would be in the same range where it's like, 3, 4, 5, like.
And you're talking about Bobby, who was a dude as a freshman. And so it's just like, that's not it. So I'm using that example as like, it's not a knock against Devo. It's more of like even a Bobby Portis bona fide dude coming in still would have probably been fourth, fifth, sixth best player because of the talent that they have.
I wish you wouldn't have said that, because now I'm just like, can Bobby and Trevin play together like 4 or 5, like defensively? What's that? They're trying to think about it.
I think Devo's value is defensively. Also, I mean, obviously individually, that tandem with Tremont is going to be really interesting to watch play out. Like, can they actually clamp guys when they've got multiple scoring options? And then I think sometimes because Arkansas went and added shooting, I think we can forget that he like led the team in threes and he shot like over 40% from deep in conference play. He's got some value too. And I think the leadership piece, like, even as much as I don't really like to talk about that, it can be pretty valuable, because
the shooting's a great point.
Everybody on the team knows what Eric wants more than him, and he can relay that to some of these new guys. Like, if it's not completely clicking with them, maybe
it seems like sometimes he really, early in the season is maybe just trying to like feel out what his role needs to be. Like, he's like feeling out the roster and the pieces around him. He's like, okay, then how can I be the best version of myself for this team, as opposed to maybe just being, I don't know, like, I'm the fourth year returner. Like, let's have these guys do that around me, because I'm here already. I don't know. And so I think that kind of leads to some of the weirdness that we see in the beginning of the year sometimes, like where he goes a game where he has, 0 shot attempts and 8 assists randomly. And then he comes out and he shoots 8 threes the next game. It's just like he's trying to figure out exactly what he needs to do. Once he does, he's a pretty damn good player. But no, the 3-point shooting, I thought that was a really good point. I remember at least twice in that Purdue game when he was out there and he got a catch pretty deep on the wing. And I'm just sitting there in my chair, like, shoot it, brother. Like, let it fly. Yeah. Like you did last year. What are you doing? And, he's getting other guys involved. Probably wasn't the best shot to take at the time, but man, just when he was lighting it up from 3 last year, and maybe it was just because he was the only guy on the roster that could do it, but it just feel like it changed so much when he was able to do that. So it's a big part of his game. Now,
I think he's a high floor player too. I mean, like, if he's knocking down threes, he doesn't have to shoot 40%. If he's knocking down like 36, 37% of his spot up attempts, he provides you some spacing. Given his defense and his ability to kind of be a secondary ball handler, I just see no way in which he won't be closing games for them. I just feel like he checks enough boxes, and he's going to have those, we've seen him be effective in so many different ways, defensively, distributing, scoring when he needs to, like transition. He just kind of gives you a little bit of a jolt of energy. And so, like, he's going to be a guy that they need some things out of. And I agree everything with you said, Curtis. I think we'll see a less passive aggressive version of his early season. Like, I don't think it's going to be as like angsty, but I do think he will probably, because we saw it in the Purdue game, he had some foul trouble there, but like, that's probably what it'll really look like, where he's kind of like, do I need to force my shot here, rather than it feeling weird where it's like, is there tension? I think because last year there were times, I mean, we can go back and look at the numbers. The first 15, 20 games of the year, Devo was not a good player for the Arkansas Razorbacks. I mean, he just wasn't.
His numbers
so it's
were wild. Yeah.
So if he can just avoid having a weird stretch like that, I think by the time this team gets things figured out, he'll have his identity and he'll be a big part of it. And so I'm looking forward. I wish we could skip forward to that January area where he kind of turns it on.
I'm glad, Ellis, you mentioned the transition piece of his offensive game. I think that's something that he's got to try to get out in broken floors more, because he's so crafty and he can be patient at times.
Slithery.
Herky jerky, and he's just tough he's just unpredictable in the open floor, and that's if a guy is really unpredictable in the open floor, it's hard to defend that guy. And I think that's part of what made him so great as a freshman, when he was really bursting onto the scene, I think, and becoming a guy that could be really impactful. He was scoring sometimes 6, 8, 9 points a game. You had an and one in there or something. He was doing that a lot of games. It's super important if you can get points like that.
Yeah. Well, we'll just we're about to wrap up here, so just a couple more that we'll get into real quick. This comes from BC. Says, do any of our current transfers have more than 1 year to play, excluding Minifield? I believe Tremont Mark has.
Tremont Mark has a year for sure.
Has 2, I think, technically, if I'm not mistaken.
I think Arkansas's roster battles got to Tremont Mark.
You count Brazil? Brazil technically has.
Technically, but I think we all think he's.
That's probably, it's what are we asking? Are we saying the ones that are actually going to come back?
I think he's asking of transfers that are brand new this year. Which ones?
Davenport is the only one that doesn't, right? I mean, Davenport doesn't.
Cameron Lawson only has 1 year.
Lawson.
I think it's just Mark and Battle who could come back.
Denige is 150.
Yeah, he's been around.
Yeah.
I think that's the case.
Yeah, because Ellis is a 5th year too, right?
Mark,
5th year player.
Yeah. I think Mark could have 2 years, but I think he would need a medical hardship from what is a shoulder injury. I can't remember exactly what it was, but when he was hurt that year in Houston, I think he's got an extra year from that, maybe.
They give out eligibility like it's candy, man. I'm telling you. You could just
they've got him listed as just a straight junior with 3 years on the roster, right? So great.
Dude, I can't wait because if this team goes to the Final Four, they're back. Dude, I've been hearing Brazil's coming back. Dude, they
cut a deal. They cut a deal, man.
Yeah, they got
a good NIL package. Yeah,
JB Hunt is coming in hot and hooking them up. It's that's just what's going to happen. And finally, this will be the last one we get to. Just Koopa says, "Do y'all think we beat Duke? I know it's too early to know, but what do y'all think?"
Me and Curtis literally posted a story today in which I gave the answer. Yes. They do beat Duke.
Yeah. We were looking at, going through the entire non-conference, and it's listen, it's not, this is a tough schedule, but it's not outside of the realm of possibility. It's not crazy to say, Arkansas go undefeated in the non-conference. They absolutely could. They haven't done it, under Muss. And some of those losses have come late, in the SEC Big 12 challenge or something, whatever, but it could happen. I think we kind of narrowed it down to, if we were to find a loss, on that non-conference schedule, is it, maybe late in the Bahamas somewhere? If you're on that 3rd game in 3 days, or is it Duke, who's the best team you're going to play? And the deciding factor at the end of the day for us is Bud Walton Arena in that environment. Is Duke going to come win in there? They maybe, but that's going to be really tough. I think it's more likely they lose a game out in Atlantis than it is to lose to Duke. I know it sounds crazy, but Bud Walton's different, man. When it's rocking, and for an environment like that, it's going to be. We might overhype it. I wonder if we're going to overhype it, because my expectations of what that's going to be like are just through the roof, man.
I wrote a column for our magazine where the headline was that game could be a moment in time. So I don't know, but I do think Arkansas's got a better chance of losing a game in Atlantis when they're playing a game in a ballroom.
Yes.
And they've got a better chance of beating Duke at home with 20K in the building.
Yeah. Yeah, because then it's going to be say if they win the Battle of Atlantis or Fort Atlantis or whatever, if they win that thing, it's you have to beat Duke. You have to.
I would be more confident that they would beat Duke. Weirdly, you know what I mean? It's then that atmosphere, because Arkansas at that point would be ranked 5th or something. You know what I mean? They would be high up there. Duke, I'm assuming, would be high. It would be. It's going to be jumping regardless, but it's going to take a special effort from somebody to beat Arkansas in Bud Walton this year, regardless of who it is, whether it's Furman or Duke or whoever. But I think Duke could obviously do it, but I do think it's going to take someone being like 8 points better than Arkansas for them to beat them at Bud Walton.
I can't wait for Filipowski to be the guy that the student section boos. That's going to be lit.
I know, man.
Golly, yeah. And it's like I just laugh too because I'm like, man, like how far we've come. It's just like we're sitting here talking about the Duke Blue Devils, the number 2 team in the country, comes to Bud Walton Arena. Arkansas is going to win. It's fine.
Yeah,
whatever. It's like it's whatever.
Unanimous. We're like, oh, you're not even considering it.
Yeah, it's like, well, I mean, how can they not? It's just they got it going on. But
I think we spoiled cover in Arkansas under Eric too. I just kind of think that's where we're at.
When you're in that atmosphere, man, it's like I'm always watching the games. I'm like, I don't even know how the players are playing, man. Like I'd be peeing my pants, man. I just don't understand how any of them.
Right. It's obviously not impossible for them to lose in that environment, but it seems a little bit silly to me if Arkansas has a really good team like they do this year to bet on it happening. I just.
Well, and dude, Muss is going to be shirtless, selling, throwing Sonic burritos pregame, like the atmosphere all week. Yeah. It's going to be a whole thing where like Muss is that Arkansas is not just going to not show up to that game. Right. I'm not saying Duke won't, but I'm just like I think it's going to take. If Duke's going to beat Arkansas, they're going to have to really earn it, And
Curtis are going to get back from the Bahamas just dog tired, but that game is probably going to give us both a lot of life.
Dude, it's going to be Arkansas Super Bowl. I mean, it's already been named.
We'll see.
Clearly.
Yeah. I just hope, and I know, I just hope they don't rush the court. I know I'm kind of that guy, but it's like I kind of hope that they don't if they beat Duke. I know they probably will, but especially if like Arkansas is like, if Duke's like number 1 and Arkansas is like number 5. I guess, but it'll be. Who cares if you win? I don't. Then it's one of those things where I'm like, I hope they don't do it, but then they win. Like, screw it. It's whatever. They won. Have fun, and to do it all. So
I mean, they did it against Auburn. I know Auburn was ranked number 1, but it's like if you're gonna do it against Auburn, you can do it against anybody. Yeah.
Well, I just we don't want to go down that whole road again because we could really get some.
Well, that was the last Super. That was the 2021 Super Bowl. That was a different Super Bowl. This is. The Super Bowls jumble together in my brain sometimes.
Yep. Undefeated, never lost in Super Bowls, the Arkansas Razorback basketball team. So, well, fellas, we've gone about 2 hours. And so before we get out of here, once again, so I like to say, plug your crap. So Curtis, we'll start with you, man. Go ahead and give the people a plug of where they can find you and your stuff.
Yeah, man. At Kurt Wilkerson _ you can see the Twitter handle there. And hop over to Hog Sports. We're pretty excited about some of the stuff we're doing. Me and Andrew have been doing a lot of collaborations, some big picture looks, bold predictions, non-conference schedule picks. We're going to be doing some game picks, best bets, all that stuff. It's pretty cool stuff. We're proud of it. So definitely hop over at Hog Sports and check us out.
All right. Andrew, go ahead and do yours because you did such a fine job last time.
I mean, you see where to find me on Twitter. Curtis is right. We produce exclusively good content at hogsports.com. I see some people commenting about football, wanting to know about football. Think we're just ignoring the football team. No, we're not ignoring them. We just don't care. But tomorrow I will be talking football with Trey Biddy on Hog Sports Live. If anyone wants to tune into that over on our YouTube channel. And we do cover football too. We do it all over there at Hog Sports. And soon it'll be baseball, and we'll be dominating that as well. So I'll let Scottie do his pitch now. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, my handle's under my name. You find my work and podcast and stuff at Whole Hog Sports. Been putting some Hogs Illustrated cover stories, profiles on Trevin Brazil, Caleb Battle. Been online in the last few days. Had a feature out on Ellis today, our college basketball preview tab. Those stories are on our website. And me and Bob and Ethan will be back with the basketball podcast of Mid-America about middle of the week, I think.
Yep.
One last plug. Everyone go to Spotify right now or Apple Music, wherever you get your music, and go and look up FBE Keon. That's Keyon. That's Keon Minifield's. He just released an album a few months ago called Therapy. Go ahead and give that a listen as you're waiting, because I know we're all waiting a year to see Keon Minifield play ball. If you want some Keon Minifield content in the meantime, he's got a mixtape that y'all should go check out. Give him the streams.
Why do you know that is my question. Like,
Curtis is the one who told me that information, actually. But Keon I talked to him about it at practice. It's good stuff. I gave it a spin.
Jeremiah Davenport raps too.
Really?
You remember when Dustin Thomas used to rap? Y'all remember Dustin Thomas?
Yeah. Wow.
You talk about obscure Arkansas big men. Dustin Thomas was rapping.
Yeah. Those are the good times too. So, Let's see. Also, I want to make sure that this gets put up there. I called it. They got 30 and they won. They sure did. I want to get that. So, anyways, John Nabors, Locked On Razorbacks Podcast. You can listen to my radio show, 103.7 The Buzz, called Out of Bounds from 1 to 4 every weekday afternoon. And you go to my Twitter handle at Buzz John Nabors for all the nonsensical things that go through my mind each and every day that usually has nothing to do with sports. So, guys, once again, it was a pleasure. Great success. Be sure to subscribe, everybody, out to the Locked On Razorbacks Podcast YouTube channel, as well as on hogsports.com and wholehogsports.com. Always get great content from all the guys for every sport that goes on there, too. And appreciate everybody commenting and having some fun with it. And we'll look forward to doing this once again here soon. So enjoyed it, guys. Enjoy the rest of the week. And I'm sure we'll be catching up with you guys all next weekend.
Love it. Sounds good.
Sounds like a plan.